Great, thanks, guys. Okay. All right. So first off, my apologies for the late last minute no show. Just had a medical emergency kind of came up I had to deal with real quick. Just one sec. People are still rolling in here. All right. So I appreciate your patience on that. We were kind of slated to start or to end a little bit early today anyway, so it kind of works out. But with that said, yeah, we'll run through and I'll probably go a little quicker in some areas, but that's okay. So there is a couple little changes I want to talk about today. We're going to start here just by looking at the overview. I did notice earlier the other day I was looking at the setup that there was a mistake with my release and due dates for an assignment. So this E2 that's right here, which is the next assignment, okay, landing page, that was scheduled to start today, and it was only for a week anyway. So I moved everything over and adjusted it. So it's actually I'm going to release it next class. So after next week, and then it's going to have 2 weeks to be done, and there'll be a work lab to complete it there on the 16th. So there'll actually be a little more time plus work lab to get it completed. So just gives you a little more time. And that's because you can use either Flexbox or Grid or a combination of both. So it just makes sense to release it after we're a little more comfortable with it. So that's a change that was made. So you can update your dates, but it should update automatically in the calendar. If you're using the calendar here, which is a really great feature, then that'll be helpful for you. Okay, so that's just a little update about that. Just while we're here in the overview, guys, a really useful resource, this overview at the top on the left-hand side of the Brightspace. There's lots of great stuff in here. Some validator. You should always be validating your code. 10% of most assignments is a validator. Okay, so please use that. Make sure you're using it all the time. And there's a list of approved stock sites. So if you use an image that's not from a if you go and get an image just off the internet, for example, or something, and if you get an image from anywhere and it's not from here, and that includes Adobe stock, then it's not allowed. Okay, this is the only place you can get images unless you're using them, or you took the image yourself. That's the only other kind of option. Okay, so just a little thing to keep in mind going forward. And I bring that up because I did a bunch of grading last night. I was up real late getting other assignments graded, so just things I've noticed. Okay, so with that said, just that little switch going on, that will be reflected if I close that up. That is reflected here under week 3, because that's where we are. I moved everything over. What else? Okay, so just a little bit, boy, one more second here. Just a little extra note for you guys. Everything we're doing everything on Brightspace. So you're going to notice that in the IMDAC, some stuff is different. Like talking about this page redesign, I moved that, right? Flexblocks, you did that last in responsive web 1. I'm just using MTM 6201 as a kind of a textbook or a place for all my resources. So don't rely on this in terms of what's coming due, or even the recordings and things like that. This is just a repository of information for me to grab from. Okay, so think of it as an online textbook, and we're just going to pick some chapters to use. That's kind of what's happening. We should be looking at Brightspace for all our due dates and everything, right? This is where we submit. So Flexbox Froggies is the name of the assignment we're going to be doing today for our in-class assignment. Or our participation level assignment. Okay, that's all linked up here. There's some other stuff here. You're going to see, probably only going to see flex blocks. We already submitted that last semester, so you're not going to be doing that. We're going to be using it for review only today. So thank you. So review only, so we won't have to be submitting that. So just once again, you will not have to submit flex blocks today. Okay, we are only using it for review. You'll be submitting Flexbox Froggies. Okay, and of course, I'll post my video when we're done. I'm just making note of this on the video because I know someone's going to come back. I've had a lot of people who just don't show up to class, and they just don't check the video and just submit things from last semester and here or whatever. And or when they took it before, or what they find online or something. It's not going to cut it. I've made some changes going forward, so we're going to have to kind of just use Brightspace and keep up to date on here. Okay. So with that said, let's get into today's topic, which is Flexbox layouts. Now, I know you guys have covered Flexbox layouts, and in some ways, A lot of this material that we're covering in this class is review, and then we're stepping it forward, taking a little more in-depth information. And it's important that we do that to reinforce the material, because some of it is very, very important. For example, responsive layout, right? In the assignment that was due today, very first criteria was responsive layout, right? So if you didn't have columns in your layout and you didn't use flex or grid or something to create actual layout, as I mentioned in last week's video, then it's going to affect your mark, right? We're trying to use responsive layout tools that we've learned in last semester. We passed that course to get into this one. So the assumption is you know those techniques and you can apply them, right? So these are kinds of things that we're doing. We're just reinforcing and building, reinforcing and building. So today we're going to reinforce and build on Flexbox layouts. I'm just going to grab the slide. We're using slideshow for this one here for number 5 under week 3. And if you wanted to follow along, and otherwise, let's just jump right into it with Flexbox. Okay, so again, some of this might be familiar to you, but if it is, just bear with me, okay? So let's start with a little bit about the history of web design. I'm not going to go too far into the rabbit hole with this, but I'm kind of OG. I've been designing for the web for a long time. I think I started professionally in the late 90s or mid-late 97, 98 or something like that. HTML was still pretty new at that time. It was really new. We connected via AOL with discs that they gave out in pretty much every magazine in the world. And so at that time, there wasn't really a lot of layout. There wasn't layout, the internet web pages started as just text, right? And then we had a little bit of layout we could use, but most of it was just hacked together. And a lot of it was, very, very static. So there wasn't a whole lot going on. And then people caught on to the idea that you could use tables, HTML tables, the kind of thing you'd use for like a, hours of operation or a shopping list, right? Just like Excel, just table layouts. And they said, well, we can put wording and pictures and create rudimentary layout using tables. At the time, we weren't 95, 2004. There wasn't a whole lot going on in terms of devices and phones and different sizes. So it was totally fine. We built websites built for monitors, right? Everything was 768 pixels wide. Eventually, we moved up to 1024 pixels wide. That was just the de facto standard. That's what we did. It wasn't responsive. It wasn't pretty. The HTML was an absolute nightmare. This was when I started really designing websites, was in the table era. The reason I bring it up is because there's still some websites out there that are built in tables. You wouldn't really know it looking at them, but if you view source and look at old websites, they're built with tables. Terrible. And so you might be tasked one day with trying to fix that. So just FYI. Then around 2000s, the World Wide Web Consortium, which is the W3C, they call it. They're the working group that makes the rules for the internet, or not the rules, but they put forth recommendations to the browsers and say, hey, you know what, this is the way we're going. You should implement these set of tools. They recommended, and they put out there, said, hey, it's important that we don't use tables. It's for tabular data, right? We're not building a grocery list, we're making websites. So with that said, we should have a tool. So they started thinking, okay, well, maybe we can use divs and spans. We can have structural tools. So they did. They built that, and browsers largely incorporated that for quite a while, and that's how we built things. We used floats, and we used in some display display inline and positioning attributes. That all became available in this period. And then, it became really prevalent that everyone's using their mobile devices, right? Around 2010, we said we really need to be able to respond to different devices. So it's important that we move forward with that. So this is around the time where we started looking at CSS1 and CSS2, and that was kind of a important time, right? Because what we were doing is we were seeing that people were more and more starting to carry their little phones, and they were starting to look on using devices, and we were shifting to saying, well, we should be making multiple sets of style sheets that adapt to so the website can adapt to different browsers. Then about 10 years ago, we started getting into grid layouts, and grid layouts is really an old print. It's an old print kind of a technique. And if I look up a grid layout web template, I don't know, let's just look and see. And a grid kind of looks something like this, right? in this idea here. Let me just open that link up, open image. There we go. Where the website is all built based on this set of columns and grids, and we're building everything inside of that so that it keeps everything it keeps everything designed in such a way that it's it's formulaic, right? The eye loves patterns. Even if we looked at, for example, say Algonquin College, we can look through and we can see it's all in groupings, right? And we're going to talk about more grid-based layout as we go forward, but we can see it's all evenly distributed so that the search bar is the same width as these buttons, and all these buttons are the same width. And we look at the next part, everything is equally distributed in a mathematically pleasing way. Even, up here we have 3 boxes, down here we got 5 boxes, but if we follow the center line, it's still all mathematically equal. And that's a really important concept that we started doing, right? So we're using these layout, and there was tools that would support that. We're going to be learning, we're learning grid layouts, a grid layout tool called Bootstrap later in the semester. That'll be a kind of a game changer. But that was something that became real popular. Even to today, I still use grid layouts and Bootstrap for all of my production level websites. And then probably about 5-6 years ago, we got into liquid layouts, and that is we stopped designing for specific devices, and we stopped trying to use tools and all these kind of specialty systems, and we just said, we can use things like Flexbox and Grid that are built in to our browser. They're built in for creating layout, and we can start using them to create really robust layouts. It's really simple. And in fact, they're largely responsive by nature. And so it's very important. And that's where we are today. We really don't need to get too crazy into using tools and systems, because Grid and Flexbox do the job for us in such an elegant way. And that's what they're there for, right? That, ladies and gentlemen, is the history of the web design in 6 simple steps. So sorry for burning through that so quickly, but it is important you kind of understand how we got where we are today. Basically starting using HTML tables all the way to today, where we have Flex and Grid and layout tools built right into our browser. And that's I can't explain to you how much nicer that is as a designer than using table layouts. So we're really lucky to have great tools like Grid and Flexbox, which we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to talk a little bit about the display property, and the display property is something we can use for a lot of different things. It's a pretty powerful property inside of CSS. What it does is it basically sets the display type of an element, how you're going to be viewing it. Okay, and there's 2 different categories for display elements. There's outer displays and inner displays. And Flex, what we're talking about today, is kind of relies on this inner display type. And it's saying, if it was an outer display type, it'd say, okay, we're going to give these divs this display of block, and it'll affect the whole element, and that's what's going to happen. It'll be a block level element. Or we could use an inner display type, something like Flex or Grid, where if we say display of Flex, then what's going to be doing is looking inside the element to see if they're child elements and affecting those. So if I have a div and they're inside of that div, there is 3 paragraphs, right? And if I put on the div, I put a display of Flex, it's not going to affect that div at all. It's only going to affect the paragraphs inside the div. That's why it's an inner display type. Okay, so it's an important discernation. It doesn't actually affect the element, it affects what's inside of it. And that's in stark contrast to what we see when we use display in other areas, like inline block to put things in a row, or that sort of idea, okay, or display none. So this is where we start talking in detail about Flexbox. And Flexbox, it's actually the flexible box module. And it's a one-dimensional tool that we can use to create layouts. And when I say one-dimensional, I mean it only works across one axis. So it'll work left to right or up and down. But we can't create whole big layouts. It's just for putting things in a row or in a column or in some variation of that. All right, and we use display flex to create a Flexbox container, and that'll affect all the children elements inside that box. Okay, everyone, this should be review. Everyone should know basically what I'm talking about. Is this all familiar to you guys so far?
Yeah, it's familiar, but again, you're a good teacher, Rob, so it's great. Yeah, no, much appreciated. But
You
no,
guys are good listeners. I appreciate it.
it is
Awesome.
it is a
Thank you
bit.
for that
Yeah,
feedback.
no, cheers.
All right. Okay. So I feel like I'm rambling on. That's why I know it's a lot. But okay. So that's Flexbox. So let's talk about what this Flexbox container is. I gotta slow down, lay off the coffee. Here, I'm gonna take a sip of water. How about that? It's been a heck of a morning already, guys. All right. So a Flexbox container. So as I explained already, it works. It only works on two main axes. It's one dimensional, right? So it works basically on main axis, which we can say it's from X or Y, which is we have to know a little bit about, like, there's the X axis and a Y axis. There's also a Z axis, but we can't affect that here. But across the X-axis, which is horizontal, that's left to right, or the Y-axis, which is vertical, and that's top to bottom. And when we affect one, then we have to remember there's also always going to be a cross-axis. So if we're on the X-axis, which is left to right, that means we can align things top to bottom as well across that inside the container. So that's important to note. So there's always going to be a main axis and a cross axis, but that just depends on which direction we're telling Flexbox to flow. If we tell it to be a column, well, column means it's going to be top to bottom or bottom to top. So that means there's going to be a cross axis, and that cross axis is going to be a row going left to right. Okay, so that's how we can align things. Say, I don't want to be on the line. I want to be the left of it or to the right of it. That's the cross axis. Right, so that's kind of, and we can use flex direction to change that flow. Okay. So flex direction, and we're going to see some examples as we go forward. I'm just kind of getting into the nitty gritty here. But flex direction allows us to change the property, or to set the property of that main axis. So by default, this is an important concept, guys, but by default, when you write HTML code, it wants to display how we put it. It's what we call source order. So if I have in my HTML, if I opened up my my visual code here, I'm just going to do something like this, and I'm going to pretend that I have a bunch of stuff up top with all my HTML, and I put a body tag. I know it's hard to read. There we go. And I have a body tag. And inside this body, I say a paragraph, and I say paragraph 1, and this one is paragraph 2, and so on and so forth, para 3. The output of this, and when I say output, it's how it displays in the browser, right, they're going to appear in source order. Para 1 is going to be at the top, para 2 is going to be at the bottom, para 3, and that's because HTML reads and displays like the English language, which is left to right, top to bottom. Okay, so it's going to appear in the browser starting at the top left. It's going to write a paragraph, para 1, and then it'll put a little space, and then top to bottom, left to right in the continuing order. This is what we call source order. It's going to continue like that. That's in a column view. So by default, flex direction is set to be different, right? So when we say display of flex, automatically it says, well, they must want to do the other thing. And instead of going source order, which is top to bottom, it's going to put everything in the alternate direction, which is in a row. Does that kind of make sense? So by default, we don't have to say go into a row. We just put a display of flex on the parent, and all the child items, it'll say, oh, they obviously wanted to go the other way. So instead of doing source order, which is top to bottom, it's going to put them in a row, which is left to right. So we can specify differently. We can tell it we want to be row reverse or column reverse. Let's see what that looks like. So here we have just imagine this white area as being a div or some sort of a structural element that has a display of flex set on it. Okay, so all the elements inside, they could be paragraphs or little blocks or pictures of little piggies, whatever it might be. Okay, all these elements inside, now that we have a display of flex, by default, without having to type anything else, all the elements will shuffle into a row because we've told it already. Display of flex, it'll say, oh, it doesn't want to use source order. Let's set it up in a row. So it runs along the default axis, which is X. Okay, that's the X axis. That means we have a cross axis of Y. Now, if we tell it we wanted to go into a column, if we specifically said flex direction column, then it says, oh, okay, well, let's go back and go to our regular view of top to bottom. So that'll now the y-axis now becomes the main axis, and that means the cross-axis is x. That's all we're getting at here. We have to think of it like we're plotting a graph at all times, and we just have to choose whether we want the default of x or we want to specify on y. Okay. There's also the reverse of both of those things, right? Row reverse, which means everything is going to start at the other side, right? So we're just changing the starting point and then flowing backwards. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for a row, or if we're in row reverse, then we just flip it around. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The same holds true for columns. And in a regular column, we go top to bottom, 1, 2, 3, so on. And in column reverse, we start at the bottom and work our way up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So we're always thinking of this kind of like we're plotting a graph, except we don't have to do much math, right? So it's easy math for beginners. It's my kind of math, guys. The dog's getting fed, sorry. Okay, so we can start also talking about how we align things across this axis as well, right? And there's a couple of different ways to do that. So we can align on the axis or off the axis. And we can use justify content to distribute along the main axis. Now, there's a couple of ways. They both have different terms, right? One's align, one's justify. How do I keep that, keep that intact? I want to show you something. MS Word, what am I looking for here? Alignment icon. All right, let's try that. We'll all have seen these tools, right? Something like this. So whenever we've looked inside, whenever you use a word processor or even your email or something like that, this is pretty common now. Everybody should know what this is, right? This is saying how we want to align the text, right? So we want to either align it to left or center align or right align, right? And this is just saying, how do we want it to, again, the English language is left to right. So this is saying, do we want to align to left or, to the beginning or the end or justify? I think we've all pretty much usually seen something similar to that. And that's what we're doing here. We want to justify our content. Text justification is just how we appear along the main axis. Okay. And it goes from that idea of justify. That's when everything's edge to edge, but I'm getting off the beaten path here. So when we talk about justify content, basically it's saying, how do we want to distribute things along the main axis? Flex start or flex end is like saying move to the start at the beginning or the end on the axis, right? We don't say left or right because it depends if we're using if we're on the x-axis, for example. If we're in row, then this is the start. If we're in row reverse, then this is the start. So we have to be kind of generic about how we say that. Flex start and flex end depends on the direction that we've set using flex direction. We can tell it to be center, then it doesn't really matter. And then we have these spacing modules, which we're going to talk about here. Obviously, if we're on the main, just to view it, if we're on the main axis, justify content, if flex direction is set to row, and we're not row reverse, then we tell flex start is going to be at the very beginning of it, right? Flex end will start at the other side. Now, this is important to note. This isn't like reverse. If we're in a regular row, this would be 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we use flex end, it's not like row reverse. Reversing it would be, 1, 2, 3, 4. Flex end is just pushing everything, saying align to the other side, right? So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's in the same order. It's not a reverse order. It's just where it's being visually aligned to, and that's the end. Okay. Then we have center, which kind of speaks for itself. There's no extra space between. It just takes everything at the size that it needs to operate. If it's a little picture that's a square, it's just going to sit right in the middle. And then we've got some of these customized spacing options, and these ones can be a little confusing, but let's kind of go back over them here. Space, if we use justified content and we say space between, right? What we're doing here is we're saying we want to, it's all in how the wording is. What we're going to do with justified content is we want to equally distribute the space in between the elements. That means the edges are going to be right up against the side of the container, but all the rest of the space is going to be equally distributed between the elements. So not before and after the first and last one, always in between, an equal amount of space distributed. Okay, it does the math for us. Thank you, Flexbox. Then we could say space around. And because we're saying around, that means it has to be on both sides. So it equally distributes the space all the way across everything. So every box is going to have an equal amount of space around it. Sorry, actually, I should clarify. It's not even so much equal space around it. It's the space is equally distributed so that it's almost more like centering, right? And then lastly, this weird one is space evenly. And this one we kind of think of like margin. If every box has, for example, let's just say X amount of space around it, right? So it says, okay, X amount on the left, X amount on the right. The next box is going to have, again, X amount on the left, X amount on the right, and then so on and so forth. So that in between, you're dealing with two sets of margins, a right side and a left side. That's why it looks twice as big. Okay, that's what's happening here. So every box kind of shares that. Does that make sense? If we look at the three models, space between equally distributes between them, but not on the outside, only in between. Space around kind of looks at everything as a whole. It says, let's look at all the elements inside, and then we'll just equally distribute. It's more like centering, but leaving space, which is nice. Okay, and then lastly, space evenly, which is almost like saying give every element an equal amount of margin between, which means an equal amount of margin, which means that you're going to have a left and right side to contend with for each element. So it looks kind of like twice the amount of space, but at the beginning and end, it's only its individual margin. So far, so good.
Yeah, solid explanation, Rob. Seriously.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
This is one of those things that when we see it in action, it makes a lot more sense. So we'll be playing with this as we go forward. But for now, we'll just kind of go into a little more description before we take our first break. Okay, so that was justify content, right? With justify content, we have our start and our end, and it's really aligning. The big trick here is we're along the main axis, right? We're justifying it. I didn't make these names, so don't kill the messenger, right? But then we have align items. So justify content is the main axis. The cross axis is align items. I wish they had something that was a little more similar, but in some ways it's better once we wrap our heads around it, because they're so vastly different that we're not going to get confused. So align items is pretty much the exact same thing, but allows us to use the cross axis. Okay, and the cross axis, of course, again, if we're on the X, if we're running on a row, which is X axis left to right, then the cross axis is just the Y axis, it's the top to bottom, right? And we can use stretch, which is the default, or flex start, flex end, center, and then we have this baseline, which we'll talk about as well. So by default, if we're on if the main axis is determined to be the X axis, okay, that means our cross axis is Y, and it's important to note that we can distribute because maybe we want to be above the main axis or below it, right? Or maybe we want to go from edge to edge, which is the default. Okay, so that's important. So if the box is big enough, it'll want to stretch it right away, which kind of centers it. Okay, that's probably sitting on the main axis. That's the default. But we could say go to the start of the top axis, right? And what that means is that we have this. We could be pushed to the top, right? So flex start is going to push us to the top of that cross axis. So the naming convention is similar. We're still aligning the items along the main axis, right? We're still, justifying them, but we're just telling them to push to the top. Okay, or maybe we're telling them to push to the bottom, flex end. An important thing to remember, though, guys, is that once we change the direction, the naming stays the same, flex start, flex end, but we're taking this, imagine this whole thing, and if I could grab it by the corner and just rotate it 90 degrees, that it was sideways, then everything kind of changes. The naming stays the same, but once we change that flex direction, right, then everything kind of switches a little bit. We have to be very careful about how our alignment's set. It all comes down to setting that initial flex direction. But assuming we're on the main axis, again, we can tell to be along to kind of flow to the top or the bottom of the container. We can tell to center on the main axis, or maybe we want to do the baseline. And then what the baseline means is it's going to find the tallest item we have, the tallest child item, and use that to set the bottom marker. So that's a a kind of a nice discernation. Sometimes we want to use that. I've never had to use that, but I'm sure there's need for it. It's a good way of keeping the content centered, but above the line, right? So we can kind of push things up. Again, every project is different. Sometimes, you play with things and you find a good use for it. Okay, flex wrap. So this is just as the name would imply, is by default, what happens is when we put all these child elements on this axis inside of a flex container, all these child elements are going to try and fit inside. By default, they're not going to wrap. Notice there's no space with the no wrap. They're not going to wrap. It wants to put them on. So they'll go in here and they'll go on and on and on and on and on. And they'll continue and just keep going forever. Okay, along that main axis. And if they'll try and crunch them if it can, we're just going to push them in. Oftentimes, and because we're talking about full-on layout tools here, it makes more sense to wrap it. Now, there is an issue here where it says no wrap instead of wrap. Notice here, this is no wrap and it says no wrap. This is actually wrap, right? Obviously, it's wrapping to a new line. Okay, just like in our text editor or in Microsoft Word or whatever we do, we can tell it that we want to wrap to a new line when it hits the edge of the container and we've used up all the available space. Instead of just pushing beyond that and overflowing it or crunching everything down to fit, which is more likely, what'll happen is it'll jump to a new line. Okay, so as we grab the edge of the browser and start moving down, these boxes will start plopping down and they kind of go in a left to right, and then a wrap over left to right, and then wrap over left to right. Okay, a little bit different than the implicit grid that we're going to see in CSS grid, but along that same type of idea. So we're just wrapping. Again, there's a mistake here in the slide where this should say wrap, not no wrap. Okay, so flex dash wrap. We have wrap and no wrap. So that's kind of the two ways we can create kind of responsive layout out of the box, right? If we wrap properly using flex and we think a little bit ahead of time, we can create nice responsive layout. And sometimes we don't even really need media queries. That's where in the beginning of the course I was saying, maybe we don't need media queries. Sometimes if we're really careful, it's not an easy task, right? But once you start wrapping your head around it, we can do that. So these are all ways that we can put a display flex on a parent and affect the interior. Okay, so we can affect the interior. I mean the elements inside. Okay, the child elements. So that's an important thing. Any questions about that? The idea of display flex, the container itself affecting all the children.
Nope. That's great. Again, explanation. Great.
Perfect. Thanks. You guys are all good? Because there's another level to this, right? And the next level of this is the Flexbox items themselves. So once we said display flex on the parents, then it gives us a nice little side bonus is that we can use Flexbox child element styling. So the items inside, all of these items can now be affected by Flexbox specific properties that are now built just for children or the items inside the box. Okay, some of those things we're going to cover here now. So order is one of them. This one is really important. We have to kind of keep in mind with order. It has I'll describe it as we go forward because I know a lot of people get confused about ordering, but I have a kind of an easy way of looking at it. And I think this all comes down to whoever put forth the specification for Flexbox flexible box module or Flexbox had a poor naming convention. I think weight would be a better way of calling this, but we'll move forward. The property is order. So by default, everything's going to display in source order. All those child elements want to display as we just described in source order. So they'll be in the order that we put them in the code. So even if we change it to a row and put them left to right, they're still going to be in the same order: para 1, para 2, para 3, para 4, and so forth. Okay, we can use the order property to change that. Now, by default, and we can use a positive or a negative. So that's an important thing, right? But by default, every child element has a default value of 0. Okay, so the ordering for all of these elements is now 0. Okay, number 3 is red because we're going to try and move that around. So knowing that all of these are 0, that's the baseline. That's where we're working at. And if we wanted to move number 3, say, to the end, we would just give it a higher order number. It doesn't have to, if there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items, we don't have to give this 5. It's not going in numeric, it's not sequence, all right? It's more like a weight. What we're doing is, imagine these are all empty boxes. So even if there's content inside, whatever, but they're all just boxes, and they're all in source order. And we just take we have equal, like a pile of equal valued weights. And if we want to move this one down to the end of the pile, we just put a weight in it. And we say, okay, now it's 0, 0, 0, 0, and then 1. And because it's got a higher number, it's going to the end. That's all it is. If we wanted to move it to the beginning, we just take a weight out. So 0, we go -1 weight. We borrow a weight, I guess. And so now it's -1, 0, 0, 0, 0. And then if we have equal amounts of numbers, it's not going to show that. But if we had equal amounts, if we wanted to also move number 4, okay, we would also give it an order of 1, and it would go to the end in source order. We'd have 1, 2, 5, 3, 4, right? Because they're both sharing that same order number, right? So just like the cascade, when the numbers are the same, then it just reverts back to following the cascade. It reverts back to that default order. Okay, that's defaulting. Does that kind of make sense? Because I've seen before, a lot of people, they'll try to assign an order number to everything. We don't have to do that. Okay, and that becomes unwieldy when we use things like content management systems, where we don't know what the client's going to put in, or how many words there might be, or how many boxes or divs they might add more. Who knows, right? In the context of using this, as we keep adding elements in, this changes. It's all dynamic. The web design is very fluid. And so rather than giving everything an order number, and if it changes, we have to go in and reapply new numbers and blah, why don't we just add a weighted number so that it'll just apply to the end, right? So again, non-sequential, I think it's just better to think of this in terms of the weight, right? Even though the term is order. Okay, and we can also use negatives as well. So we can completely reorder it in that way. Any questions about order? And I want to specify on this for a little while, because it's an odd concept. But does that make sense for you guys? Or does anybody not understand that? Okay, we're going to see it in action anyway, so we can play around with that. But I think it's just better, and it's just how you think of it. All right, so let's talk about Flex Grow. Flex Grow is awesome. Okay, it's a really, really cool tool. It's an awful lot like it allows us to kind of use, like we did in CSS Grid. Do you remember we talked about fractionals, the FR unit? I don't know if you guys remember that.
I don't remember it actually.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll talk about that in next week. But it allows you to use a fractional representation of the whole to use up the available space. So instead of saying like space evenly or space around, which is I want all the child elements to take up to use up a certain amount of space, maybe we want to set things up so that we have like more of a column style layout. So we use the Flex Grow property. Okay, by default, it's got a 0, a property of 0. So Flex Grow 0 is the default. And what we're looking at here is as we add more value, which is the numeric value 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it's going to grow to fill the available space. Let's go back and look at our five boxes here again by default. So we're going to start by affecting number 3. That's why it's red. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, everything is source order, taking up only the space that it needs. So in this case, maybe it's a picture, whatever it might be. Okay, so there's some space left over, and we want to use up. We don't want to equally distribute everything. Remember, we're on individual child items. So we say I want to use number 3, and I want to make it wider so that the middle column is the biggest column. Okay, or in this case, when I say column, just because they're all in a row, like I'm thinking this in terms of a website design, right? This is the left edge of the page. This is the right edge of the page, or the div or whatever it might be. And we want to fit everything in terms of maybe make a nice slideshow or whatever it might be. Okay, so what I can do is I can just assign it a higher number. So Flex Grow 1, it's going to use up the available space. What's essentially doing, and this is the key here, guys, is a little trick that I've learned, is we have to do a tiny bit of math, but it's simple. It's simple fractional math. Okay. When I say fractional math, I just mean 1 out of 2 or something like that. And we'll start with that. In this case, the available space represents, okay, there's 100% of this available space. right? This available space is 100% of what's available. Okay, so 1 out of 1. When I add this this flex grow in, I say 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look inside look at all these the children inside this flex box, and I'm going to say, okay, how many times does flex grow appear? It appears 1 time, and this item has 1, so it's going to be 1 out of 1, which is 100% of the available space. You're using up 1 available space out of 1 available space. That's 100%. So when we add in a second item, so maybe the fourth one, what it's going to do is now we have flex grow 1 on both of them. So again, looking at all the individual items that we have, there's 5 of them. Okay, and in all of those 5, there could be a million of them, doesn't matter. But out of all the child elements, flex grow appears twice, so it's out of 2 now. This one's going to use up 1 out of 2. This one's going to use up 1 out of 2. That means we have a half and a half. 1 out of 2 is a half, right? So it's used. That's how we determine the available space that's being used up. Before I move on, does that concept confuse anyone? Let me just touch on it very quickly again. This represents 100% of the available space. 100% in a fraction is 1 out of 1, right? We're using, if there's only 1 available space, we're going to use 1 available space. That's 1 out of 1 or 100%. Okay. So when I'm talking about making items, these individual child items bigger, I can just look and say, how many times out of all the child items do I use the flex grow property? If I use it 1 time, and this is set to 1, then then it's 1 out of 1. It's using up 100% of the available space. Flex grow just means grow to fill the available space. How much space? 1 out of 1. Okay, so in that way, it likes to use the lowest common denominator. It doesn't make the sense to put 8 when there's only 1 here. We try and keep it as low as possible. Okay, so if we wanted to, if we have a couple of items we want to grow, then we look at all the child items, say how many times are we telling it to grow to fit the available space? In this example, we're telling it twice to grow. So it's now out of 2. So each of these items can be set 1 out of 2 and 1 out of 2. Now, in some situations, we want to have them bigger, but at different proportions, like this, where where the available space is being distributed this way. Well, that's the same idea, but now we're just looking at the numbers. How many available flex grows how many times do we use flex grow? 1, 2, 3, right? So now the first one is 2 out of 3, and the second one is 1 out of 3. So this would be 66.6%, right? Or 2/3. And this number 4 here would be 1 out of 3 or 33.3%. It's just very simple math. Out of all the child elements, count the number of flex grows. That's the out of whatever number. And then we just put a number ahead of it is whatever we put for that individual item. So right now we know it's going to be out of 3. And this item, the first one here, we're telling it 2, so it's going to be 2 out of 3, or 2/3 of the space that we're sharing. And then the second option is going to be the second box is 1 out of 3, or 1/3. So that's how we're distributing the available space. So it seems confusing, but it's just very simple math. Does anybody not understand what I'm talking about? Was that helpful to clarify what that means? And the reason this is really nice, guys, is because it's responsive out of the box. It's just saying use up a percentage of the available space. Can I clarify for anyone else? Okay. We're going to see it in action as well. Anyway, I'm gonna go to the wire a little bit, guys. I'm gonna cut out just because of the time constraint. I want to cut down to a 10-minute breaks. I really apologize. So I'm gonna just move just a little bit more. We've only got looks like 1 more thing to talk about here. 2 more actually. I'll just touch on it. But align self. Okay, we know that align items moves all the. It's a property we would put on the parent container, right? It says items, so that's plural. Right? We say we want to move all of the items, and it's going to run across the cross axis, right? So justify content is on the main axis, align items is on the cross axis. So we can use align self, right, to move 1 item off. And we just say again the same, flex start, flex end, right, where it'll move things inside just the cross axis. Now there is no way there's no flex property for moving on the main axis, individual items on the main axis, because if I took number 3 and I wanted to, let's just go back to this, for example. If I took number 3 and I wanted to move number 3 only to the flex end, it can't go past. It's being blocked by 4 and 5, right? So there's nothing built into flex that'll allow you to justify a single item to the end. We have to use regular old CSS for that. Okay, but we can tell it to be on the cross axis by using align self. So in this example, on the parent element, we have a display of flex and align items flex start. Align items says we want all the children inside to be flex start, which is at the top or at the beginning of the cross axis. In this case, the main axis is left to right, so it's going to push everything up to the top, which is on the cross axis, to the start of that, right? And to the top in this case. And then I can tell one individual item. I can say I want nth child 3, or I can give it a class, whatever, of red box. Only that one to be align self, which is a singular term, right? To flex end, and that way it'll move to the other side and it'll go to the bottom. We see this kind of idea sometimes in things like pricing charts, where if you hover over at one of them, like they'll all be flex end at the bottom, or aligned items will be flex end, will be all aligned on the bottom. And then when you hover over one of them, it'll say, oh, go flex start, and it pushes up, right? When you hover over it, it just moves up. Sometimes that's a simple way of doing that. It just, when you hover on it, it just triggers JavaScript to say, okay, move now to, or not even JavaScript, but CSS, that'll say go from the default to applying align self flex start or whatever it is to shuffle it around just ever so slightly. Okay. There's one thing that we haven't covered here, and I'll just really briefly touch on it before we take our break, and it's called flex basis. Flex dash basis, BASIS. And all that really is the flex version of width. Okay, it handles both min width and max width at the same time, but it's really just width. And when you're working inside of Flexbox, it's preferable to use the term flex, or to use the property of flex basis rather than width. But in the end, truth be told, between you and me and the wall guys, they're both the same thing. There's a few differences, but at the level we're playing at, it's baseball is no matter what, right? It's all the same game. So base, flex basis, and width are largely interchangeable at our stage. If you want to look more into it, you can. There's a few things in terms of specificity rules, but nothing that we'd have to probably worry about at this point. You guys have already done flex blocks last semester. We're going to use this as a review tool only. So it is not due, okay? I can't be more clear about that. We're going to take a break here in a second, but it is not due to be submitted. We're just, when we come back from break, we're going to use it as a simple review tool, just to go back over it, reinforce, use it as a sandbox playground. Okay. When we're done with that, we will move on to the actual in-class assignment that we'll be doing today that you'll submit. Okay. But just 100% clarity, guys, you will not be submitting flex blocks. All right. Let's take a 10-minute break. I'm going to set a timer. Is 10 minutes enough for you guys? Hopefully we're good. I'm sorry to cut it down a little bit to the wire.
10 minutes is fine.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to set a 10-minute timer, and we'll come back and we'll get the ball rolling. Thanks, guys. All right, guys. Hopefully everyone's back. So that was a brief refresher on Flexbox, right? So just kind of give you a little bit of the history. We went through, again, a visual, just a lecture of what it does. And so I want to take a little opportunity to go over, we're going to use flex blocks, which was an assignment you did last semester. We're going to use that as a kind of stepping point going forward, just to practice. Again, you're not going to be submitting anything, so no stress there. There's no submission for it. We're just going to be practicing and playing around as a playground. Then we're going to do the Flexbox froggies together. That's the actual kind of participation exercise for today. That'll be due tonight at midnight. Okay, and then that'll pretty much cover what we're working on today. Okay, so kind of worked out that we were a little short on time, but that's what today looks like. Okay, and the reason I don't spend as much time on Flexbox is because it's only one dimensional. It only moves in one direction. I would rather spend more time on grid and reinforce that, because that is the most powerful thing in CSS as far as I'm concerned. It's so powerful. But with Flexbox, we're going to hit flex blocks and just review it. So I'm going to start there. I think we're good for the slides. I'm going to close that. Okay, so we can go, there's a couple of ways we can do it. You can go to the links section under week 3, Brightspace, you go to link section, you're going to see Flexbox. It says for review only because once again, we're not submitting Flexblocks today. Or you can go under week 3 in the MTM 6201 IMDAC shell, and you should see flex blocks there. Either way, when I click on it, it's going to open up this page. Okay. And it says there's a submission. Once again, guys, we're not submitting it. I'm just going to use it to get to flex blocks. There it goes. Okay, you've already submitted it. In fact, you're under the policy for AA18, which is academic integrity or whatever. You're not even allowed to submit the same thing twice. If you submit the same thing twice, then it's probably considered academic integrity charge, right? So please don't submit this. If it's by accident, that's one thing, but it shouldn't be by now. Anyway, I think I've made my point clear. Don't submit that. So we're going to be playing around in here. This is just a good practice space to do that. So you've already submitted it. You don't have to, but if you want to follow along just to do it again and you want to save it, make sure that you fork the pen. Okay, make sure you saved in that down here in the bottom right-hand corner. You can fork, but you don't have to stress too much about it. There's otherwise it's really just, you can just practice, and when you're done, you can turn it off. You should already have a copy of this saved in your CodePen kind of library here. So let's just take a look at what it looks like. So there's a main container that's holding this entire gray box area. And then each stack is a div that shares a class of stack. All the stacks have a class of stack, every one of the gray boxes, every one of them. And they also have a stack 1, which is going to allow us to tag onto that individual stack, right? So they're all stack, but this is also stack 1, also stack 2, and these are classes we can use. All the blocks that are inside just have a div class of block, and then the colors and numbers are programmatically created inside the code that we've built in Flexblocks. Okay, so you see there's no 1, 2, 3 in there, and they're all the same that way. Okay, so stack 3 with a bunch of blocks, stack 4 with a bunch of blocks. So that's just so we know what we're getting at when we build the CSS. That's kind of how it's put together. So I'm going to close this HTML markup. I'll leave it a little bit open here, but we should be able to see where we're at from there. Let me see if I can. Yeah, I can't really. That's fine. Now, as we go through, there's a couple of things we're going to want to remember. We're affecting the first stack. So, for example, the first one's going to be like stack 1, right? And that's how we're going to affect that particular stack. In some cases, we may have to affect the divs inside, or specificity purpose, something like that. And in other cases, we might even have to get more specific, but we'll cross the bridge when we come to it. In all cases, the stack is going to have a display of flex. And once I give it a display of flex, we can see right away it changes from its default ordering, right? I said, okay, if I just let it do display, this is the source order it's appearing in. Again, the blocks are top to bottom, 1, 2, 3, top to bottom, 1, 2, 3, top to bottom. As soon as I say, well, on the parent element, which is the containing div, the outlined area, the delineated with dashes, as soon as I give it a display of flex, it says, well, they must want to do the opposite of the normal thing, of the default thing. So it'll put it in flex for you. We don't have to say display or order or inline or float or anything. It does it automatically. That's the beauty of flex. Really powerful stuff. So once we do that, we're set. We've stack 1 now looks like the first example. We're good to go. Let's move on. At any point, guys, if you get confused, you want to try something out, not sure, having trouble, whatever, just stop me, put your hand up, or mention in chat, whatever you need. Okay, throw a can at me or something, I'll be good. So in the second one, what we want to do is we want to use the display and flex direction to get it to appear as a column. Okay, so let's check that out. So we're in stack number 2. Right away, we can say it's going to be a flex display, and when I do that, it says, okay, well, let's move into a row. But in the example we have here, it's got it in a different direction, right? So we want to use flex direction, just so it says here in the instructions. And what we want to do is we want to say, well, it's set into a row already, but we want to reverse it, right? So we can use row dash reverse. And what it does is it's just going to reverse the order. And what we're doing here is, let me just get rid of that. What we're doing is here is important, because notice where the flex start is. At the start is number 1 here on the left-hand side. But once I reverse the direction of row, the flex start is at the other end now and working backwards. So flex start and flex end are kind of flexible, if you'll excuse my stupid pun, but they're flexible. This is now flex start. So we actually rotated the starting point. Okay, so that's important to note. Flex start isn't on the left. We have to think of it in terms of the direction that we're heading, not where it's aligned. Do you guys see what I mean by that? If I get rid of this once again, it's not putting in saying that in the order of left to right. What it's doing is saying number one is always going to be the start, and we're talking about the order that we're flowing. That's going to determine where start is and end. Okay, so that's what we're doing for number 2. Let's continue on. Let's look at number 3. So stack 3. Okay, in stack 3, what we're doing is we're looking at spacing. So there's a few things we want to keep in consideration here. So first off, I'm going to give it its display of flex, and it's all going to jump into a nice row. And notice it's going to compress them right away. That's because the default is no wrap. So when I look at an output like something like this, and when I'm thinking of my code, I always say, okay, I look at this output and I think visually, what am I trying to accomplish? In this case, what I'm trying to accomplish is 2 rows. I want to make sure it's in a couple of rows, right? So stack number 3, right away I realize I'm going to have to wrap it. So I can just right away say flex wrap, wrap. Perfect. As soon as I see it went into it goes from crunched up all in a line over to 2 nice rows, I can say it needs to wrap. So it's all about looking at patterns. But here we have some space that we need to work with, right? Now, you guys could be going back and look at your assignment and just following along, and you're going to try and throw the answer up as quick as you can. But please don't do that, right? Use this as an actual chance to think critically about what's happening and look at the refresher. So at this stage, it's telling us they want to use justify content, right? Justify content, we're putting it on the parent item. So it's going to justify all elements inside. And we want to use one of those special spacing ones, right? So let's just take a look at what we can do here. Let's take a look first at space evenly. Okay. And when we space evenly, what it's doing is has an equal amount of space in between all the elements from left to right, starting from each edge to edge. Okay. We can kind of see it's an equal amount of space between each element. Okay. Distributes them. It's almost kind of like centering. And then we've got space between. And space between will push everything right to the edge. Now there's, I think, 4 pixels of margin around everything, but it'll push everything right to the edges, and it'll only put the space in between the inner elements. Okay, so that's an important discernation. But what we have here, I'm not sure if it's a space between, I think it's probably going to be space between, but we've also got space around. And space around, it's a weird one hard to see here. Remember, there's a little bit of pixel on each side. But what it's going to do is it's going to effectively add a margin to each element so that there's a margin left. So we're doing it over here, margin left and a margin right. And then an equal amount of margin left and margin right. And so that it looks like there's a little more space between all the interior elements than there is between the edge elements. That's an important discernation. But I think what we're looking for here based on this is probably what do you guys think? Based on a picture on number 3, what do you think we're trying to go for our justify content?
Space between.
Probably space between, yeah. And I can justify that by saying there's not a lot. Again, there's already default spacing in here, unfortunately, but it's going as far to the edges as it can, and it's only distributing the space equally between the interior elements, right? So that's the right way. Stack number 3. Just trying to provide explanation and justification for what I'm doing as I go. Again, if you guys have any questions, please do let me know. Let's move on to stack number 4. Stack number 4, this back in any time before about 5 years ago or 6 years ago was excessively difficult to accomplish. That is a vertically and horizontally centered element inside of another element. So we wanted vertical and horizontal centering. If you look it up on the internet, it was a nightmare to accomplish before. It was very difficult. And with Flexbox, it's super simple. So let's check that. Let's see how that works. We start with a simple display of flex. What we want to accomplish here is we want to use justify content and align items to justify on the main axis and align on the cross axis. That's all we're doing. And we're centering both. So it's a really simple tool if we know that we have to use the words the property of justify content and align item. Once we know what those items, sorry, once we know what those two properties do, then vertical centering just makes sense. We want to center, we want to justify center on the main axis and align center on the cross axis. Let's just see what happens, for example, when we change the flex direction to row reverse, right? So see what happens, okay? It just reverses it. How about column? Let's just play around here a little bit, just so we can see what happens. When I change that to column, again, vertically, everything's centered. We can kind of see that it's still using the same sets of tools. All right, by default, we're set to a simple row. So we're able to match that up. Okay, number 5 is a big one. Stack 5. Now in stack 5, we have to do a couple of different steps, right? We need to, it looks like we need to affect not only the elements in the inside, but we also have to use some individual items. So not just the flex container, which is the outer box, but also the flex items, which is the children inside. Okay, so we need to do that. So we'll start with a simple display of flex. It's going to put everything together. Okay, we went over this before. We see it already that there's a pattern that we see. It wants to be in 2 rows, right? So what do we want to do? We know it has to go into 2 rows. Yeah, you got it, Carol. We want to make sure it's wrapping. So when we look at it, just using our lizard brain and looking at this with simple design eyes, we can say it's going to be wrapped into 2 rows. So flex wrap. We go against the grain, say wrap it. Now we're not using up space in between, right? And since we're not using space between the elements, right? We want to be a little more critical about what's happening. It wants us to use justify content. We can. I'm not going to worry about it right now. It looks fine. So what we want to do is we can't adjust the sizing of the interior elements by affecting the parent, right? The flex container. So the flex container, which is the parent element, can't adjust the individual sizes. We need to think about compound selector for that. Something like stack 5 div, or even better yet, block. That is anything with a class of block inside of anything with a class of stack 5. If we look at our HTML, anything with a class of block inside of anything with a stack 5 class, right? That'll affect it. There's a couple of different ways to do it. Again, there's always a couple of ways to attack any of these items. So we've already said display flex. We don't want to put display flex on this child item anyway. As a simple aside, guys, we could give a display of flex to individual items inside, and it would have children inside that would be affected by flex. That's totally allowable. You can do that. You can, what we call nesting it, not a problem. But we're not going to do that here. What we want to do is we want to make it fill the space, right? So I could say width 100%, right? 100% perhaps if I did it, right? Once I do that, I have a little bit of a problem, right? So it's not really a width thing that we're looking for. Can you guys think of something that we want to use, something we'd use to have these individual elements take up the rest of the available space? We want each of the individual, this is going to affect all of the individual items, and we want them all to equally share the remaining individual space. Pardon me?
Space evenly?
The space evenly uses up it would distribute them and put space between the elements. We don't want to do that. According to the picture, what we're looking for is we want each element to grow to fill individual space. We want it to grow to fill individual space. Remember, guys, we have this, oh, it's gone now, yeah. Flex grow. Let's see if we can use the class of, or the property of flex grow, okay? Now, we look in here, there's 8 elements inside, and we want every one of those has a class of block, right? I see flex grow 1.5 and 1. Flex grow is the correct way to do it. What we want to do is we want them all to share the equal amount of space. So let me just explain how that's going to work really quickly. If I give each of them a flex grow of 1, what that means is that we're going to equally distribute the space. All of them are going to have 1/8 of the amount of space, right? Let's just take a look and see how that works. Okay, there we go. The remaining space is now broken up into 8 individual pieces and distributed among, right? Because this now has a flex grow of 1, this has 1, this has 1, all of them do. Anything with a block class, which is all of them. So there's 8 left. So each one of these, right, now takes, I don't want to get into that, but each one of them is going to take up or share an equal amount. Does that make sense? They all have a flex grow of 1. That means it appears 8 times, and each one is going to use up 1/8. 1 out of 8, 1 out of 8, 1 out of 8, and so on. Does that make any sense to you guys?
It does. It does make sense.
Yeah. Anybody not understand that philosophy? The reason we put it on all of them, it just uses up the difference. Now, as somebody said, well, we could use something like space evenly. Well, let's just see what happens when we do that. Space evenly, actually, it wouldn't do anything because space evenly is something we would put on the parent element. And what it would do is it would use up the space between, but we don't want to do that. We want to actually make the element bigger to use up that space. Okay, so it's padding versus margin when you think about it. Let's look at stack number 6. Stack number 6. Okay, we're going to want to use display of flex again. Okay, stack number 6 is a little bit trickier. Okay, not too crazy. We're going to use a couple of different things here. Now, we have to look at altering the direction, right? We don't want it to be left to right. We want it to use the y-axis as the main axis. And in order to do that, we have to change the direction inside the flex container, or the parent. We just changed it to column. Now, guys, once we've done that, this is an important one. This one might be one of the most important ones we have. It's gonna set the foundation for some stuff going forward here. But once we do that, remember, we've just changed the direction we're going is the order for flex start and end. We are going top to bottom. That's our main axis now. Keep that in mind. We're going top to bottom. So flex start and flex end, okay, and justify and all those things. They all changed, right? Our main axis. So don't be confused by left to right, top to bottom. Just remember we've changed it. So our align versus justify is going to change. It's going to be different. Okay. Okay. So we changed to a column, but it also means that we want to have each one of these set up in such. I'm going to use this block again. We want to have each one of these working to fill up the amount of space. Okay, so same type of idea. Now, remembering that we changed the direction, let's use flex grow and see what happens. Flex grow. We want each one of them to grow to use up the available space. Did that work the way you guys thought it was going to, or did you guys think it was going to fill this way?
I thought it would fill the other way.
I get that it was going to fill to the bottom because it's following the flex direction we've set it to through column.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. Once we set this to row, again, it does what we think, which is left to right. But the flex grow kind of, it follows because we've changed to a column this way, it's going to do the same thing. By default, it's going to grow to fit along the main axis, right? And that's where I wanted to make, that's an important discernation. It's an important thing to remember, is that the main axis is top to bottom. So that's the way it's going to grow to fill available space. So it's a bit catchy sometimes. You have to think about the direction you're heading. That's a really important rule. And so now if we wanted to, we could say with 100%, which would take up the available space, right? Because width is left to right. Width is a regular CSS attribute. It's not constrained. You see how that's a different thing? We're able to interchange regular CSS with flex specific properties, right? What about flex basis? We talked about that. 100%. See, flex basis 100% that's a problem because it's looking in a different direction. It's a flex property. So if I go back to width, it's just saying, oh, regular old HTML, we're going to use that or CSS, we're going to use that property instead. Super bizarre, right? Was that helpful to see how that worked? This is when you're working in Flex, this is the thing that'll confuse you more than anything is when you change directions like that. Okay. I'll move forward. Stack number 7, stack number 67. Oh my goodness. Okay. Stack number 7 down here. So in this case, we want to use, we're going to be using display and margin. Now, again, we're going to be interchanging and using CSS with Flex properties with regular old, what we call vanilla CSS, no flavor, just regular. So I'm going to put a display of Flex on the items. Pardon me, guys. Whew. And yeah, I'm going to put a display of Flex on them. That puts them in order. Now, you would think, or you would hope, I guess, that you could use something like you've got, if you wanted to align along the main axis, or if you wanted to, arrange it along the main axis, you would use justify content, right? So you would think there might be justify self, and I could put justify self on that. Let's just see if something like that works. If it does, I'll be really shocked. I'm not going to lie. Dot block. We only want to affect the. I could say nth child 3, right? But what happens if we? Why is that not a good idea? When we're building out, imagine this was a navigation and we had like home and about, and this was like a search bar, a Facebook icon or Instagram, something like that. Why would nth child 3 not be a good solution in this case? Just as a best practices question. Anybody? It's pretty specific. We're saying we want the 3rd child, right? Is there something that would be better in this case to target this element here in the end, to push it?
Maybe just last child.
Yeah, I think that'd be a better choice. Why would that be a better choice, do you think?
Because if we edit the website and add more things, it's still going to keep the layout responsive and the same, and like the last thing will still show up at the end, I guess.
Bingo. That's part of it, right? The thing is guys, it's very rare that we're going to be designing websites purely for ourselves, right? I find designing a website for me is the hardest part. In fact, my website's always crap and everyone else looks good. But so we're designing for someone else. We don't know what they're going to want to put in there. They're going to be contacting us all the time. And can you change this and edit that? So if it's a navigation, or maybe they're adding pictures or whatever it is they want to do here, it might change. And being this specific about it is problematic. We have to think in a scalable way. We're not trying to push the 3rd item. We're trying to push the last item. We want the last item to be pushed over. So last child is the best solution. That way, no matter how many items they put in here, the last one will be the one that's affected, right? You have to be critical when you're thinking about this, thinking about these, the solution here, right? Now, I'm going to break off from this just a little bit more and talk about something else, because it's going to come up in the assignments. I ask you guys for commenting a lot, right? So in the comments, you might put something like this, and you're going to say, you would say, I don't know, push 3rd box to the end. Okay. So sure, you could do that, but in the commenting in this case, that would be a perfect scenario why we would put comments in here, right? If somebody was coming in looking at this and they'd say, well, why didn't they just use nth child 3? You could actually put that in the comment and be descriptive. Okay. And I know this is a little bit off the wagon trail, guys, but it's just, it'll save me having to talk about it later. But it's a good place to put a good descriptive content, so that I, as an assessor, can look at you guys and say they're thinking critically about the code, and I can tell because I can look. Used last child to ensure the final element moved to the end of the chain, right? Or whatever, however I wanted to word it, but something a little more critical. So when I read it, I can say this person understands the code and was able to see implications, and I can grade you and say, yes, they know what they're doing. Okay. That's my job, right? If you just say stack 7 block, well, I know it's a stack 7 block. Anyway, back onto the wagon train. I just really wanted to cover that, guys. So that was an exercise in critical thinking. Good job. So last child, I want to push this to the side. So in this case, again, I wish there was something like justify item or justify self or something like that, right? That'd be really nice. And I could say flex end. It doesn't work though, right? And it doesn't work because it's too easy for something to pop in line, and we wouldn't be able to say move number 2 to the end because it's pushed up against this, right? Up against the side of our block. So there is no left to right justification for that. So what I have to do is use plain old vanilla CSS. And can anybody remember how we would push something, an individual block level element to the right-hand side in this case? Is there a property that will allow us to do this in regular vanilla CSS, not a flex level property? We can think critically about this. What are we really trying to do? We're trying to take 3 and move it, but more importantly, we don't, we can't just move number 3 without getting crazy into positioning. The simple solution is to add some space between 2 and 3. We don't know how much space that is, so we'd like it to do it automatically, right? And we don't want to have space. We don't want it to be selectable or anything. So we don't want it to be like padding, right? We want to automatically add margin in between that, right? That's kind of what we're looking to do. So the third item, or the last item, I want to add margin to the left-hand side. How much? Well, we want this to be responsive. So whatever available space, automatic. Just like any verticals or any centering, right? Any kind of, like if we want to center an element on a web page, if we have a big like a block in the middle, like this is all centered, you would use margin auto, right? Now I could say margin auto and it would center it, right? We know that trick works. It just says use up any available space by distributing automatic margin between it. So why wouldn't that work the same way with margin left? I could say I want to do the first child, and then in that case, I would just have to change this to I want to have margin on the right-hand side. So we can interchange the two, CSS and Flex. Sorry, I got off the track a little bit here, guys. I'm just trying to use this as a playground to kind of move around and play and see things in here. So it's important that we critically think about these things. Okay, stack number 8. We know we're going to use display flex. I'm just going to set it up for display flex. Now, this one here, we want to do there's a couple of things in here. We have to affect the flex container as well as a couple of individual children for different sizes, right? So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so first, right away, what do we? Is there anything we want to do? We can see that we want to accomplish here. What do you guys think? Take a look at the expected output, right?
It's going to be the first block is going to be taking up 1 space. The second block is going to be taking up 3, and then the third and fourth are going to be equal.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So we there's going to be some spacing, right away. We know that individually. But is there anything on the flex container that we can add that's going to help achieve this look? Wrap. Right, Marina, Rob, yeah, you guys got it. We want to look at wrapping it. So what I'm doing here is kind of like when I write CSS, I'm trying to look in terms of, okay, let's start at the lowest common denominator and work our way to more specific stuff. So by affecting the wrap, I can have these things move across. Let's just see. So flex wrap, I know this is going to have to be an issue. Will it wrap now? No, it won't, right? But when we start making the sizes bigger, we can make this wrap. Okay, we know we're gonna be able to do that. So that's something that's going to have to happen. And that was something that goes on the parent element. Now let's look at going on the inside. Now, if we go on the inside, because we're in flex and we know we're in a row, we can use flex basis pretty comfortably. And we can use things like 25%, 35%, or we can use flex grow. In this case, it wants us to use calc and flex basis. So that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to start by going into the stack 8, and then I'm going to affect specifically, let's start with the There's a couple that are unique. 1 and 2 are unique, and then 3 and 4 are the same. So let's start with number 1, nth child 1. That's going to be a unique one. And I could use with, but because I'm inside of a flex property, I think flex basis makes more sense, right? And I could just say 25%, but as we've noticed before, there is space that I have to account for between everything. So that's a problem. So it's actually, what is it? 2 pixels on every side. So 4 pixels in total. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use this calc function. Have you guys seen this calc function before?
I don't think we went over it in our section last semester because I was really confused when I saw it in this assignment.
Okay, awesome. Well, then that's a great opportunity for me to go over it with you. We'll still have an hour to do the final assignment, so we have plenty of time. I love that one of the most powerful things that we see coming out in CSS is that it's not just a layout tool, but it's actually turning into a full-on. There's some programmatic experience we have there. When I say programmatic, it means we can do some functionable things. Okay, and that in that term we can use functions. Now, anytime in most programming languages that you see a word immediately followed by 2 brackets like this, it means it's a function. So a function is really just it's a toolbox, right? It's like a function would be like turn on the stove and it turns on or whatever. So this is allowing us to do things. In this case, the function that's built in here is calc, which means calculate. And then in between, notice there's no space. And then in between the brackets, it's expecting a parameter. And the parameter is, in this case, we're telling it calculate, and it says, okay, what do you want to calculate? And goes inside here. What do we want to calculate? So that would be the whole thing. How about something for a parameter? For an example, if we wanted to look at it, might be the test function. Okay, and it says, okay, what do you want to apply that function? Or the name function, and I could say, okay, the name we're going to apply is Rob. Okay, might be whatever we want it to be. In this case, we're using calc, and calc is just a way that we can calculate. Now, the reason we want to use calc here is because we know 25% works, but we also know there's 4 pixels of padding that we have to calculate for, or margin, and we can't in our heads. Like if I ask you to tell me what's 25% minus 4 pixels, what's the answer to that? It's impossible, right? There is no way for you to tell me what 25% minus 4 pixels is, especially when we're talking about responsive. Everything's responsive these days. The browser width changes, that changes. We'd be constantly doing math. There's no way to come up with a number to what that is, because percent is relative and pixels is absolute. We can't mix those two. But thankfully, calculate can. It calculates on the fly because we're sitting here in front of a more technology than flew the first space shuttle into space, right? So just in our computer alone here. So this can do that pretty simply. Calculate. So what do we want to calculate? Well, we just put our expression inside. We want to calculate, in this case, the first one is 25%, right? So we'll assume that 25% minus the 4 pixels that we have. Great. Look, it did it automatically. It's just going to do the calculation and apply it. Okay. Does that kind of make sense? Like it's the same thing as nth child. It's a function. Okay. Which child do you want? The first one.
Yeah, it does make sense. It does.
Yeah.
It does. Thank you.
And this is something you guys are going to see going programmatically if you go forward, like when you get into JavaScript and we start talking about real programming languages, because web design isn't programming. It's really just markup and property value pairs for styling, right? It's markup, not not an actual programming languages. But this is your first kind of view of a programmatic theory in play, and it's using functions. So we say what function we want to use, and then we tell it how to apply that function. In this case, calculate, use a calculator. It says, okay, what do you want me to calculate? And there it is. And it'll automatically create that little bit. Now, big thing to notice, watch what happens. If I put a space here, whoops, not V. If I put a space here, it stops functioning. There's no space. We put the name of the function immediately followed by our brackets. All right, so we've got our flex basis set up. That looks great. Let's continue that theory. Let's try that with the second one. Stack 8, block nth child, and I'm going to use the second one. Sorry, guys. Nth child number 2. And we're going to do the same thing, flex basis. And I'm going to set up a calc, which is calculate. Now, we know there's 4 pixels of padding we have to account for. So I'm going to remove that. What's the remaining space we have? What do you guys think we're going to put in here? We're working on number 2, the red number 2, right? Second child. What's our expression? Yeah, 75%. Like this. Uh-oh, it broke. Yeah, it's because we didn't calculate. It's great because we have to tell it what to do. Yeah, 75% minus 4 pixels. That's the point. Calculate is going to do a calculation for us. And that's getting rid of the 4 pixels. So it's a really simple way of doing these types of things. Another way, we might be able to use the box model, like something like that. But this, in this case, is just showing us that we can use some cool functions. All right, we've wrapped it. Now we have equal amount for 3 and 4. So I'm just going to do a kind of a copy paste here. The 3 and a comma means and, right? 4. So 3 and 4 are going to share the same value, and that is flex basis calc. And I'm going to calculate 50%, which is half, and minus 4 pixels. Kind of an interesting way to approach things, right? So we're actually just using one simple method, right? We could just use width too, but one simple method calculation to get rid of all the only thing we really know for sure is that we have 4 pixels we have to mess with. So there we go. All right, on to the final one, guys. This one's going to require a bit of work. Stack number 9. Okay, start with stack number 9. We know we've got a display of flex because this is a Flexbox assignment. Okay, they all go in a row. Is there anything else we know that's going to affect the flex container that we want to add in here? We look at the expected output. Is there anything? Yeah, you guys got it. Right? We say, what is there anything else we need to add just to the flex container, which is the parent container? We have a display of flex, and then we also say, oh yeah, there's a wrap going on. By default, it's no wrap, so we say, no, we want you to wrap. Okay, we can see down here that there's only 2, but that's because we haven't added any space in here yet, right? So in this case, we're going to be looking at several different ways to attack it. So I'm going to start by let's look at this. So stack 9, okay, and I'm going to start. We'll start with the. Just let me a second here to look at the best way to do this. I know we have some ordering, right? We have to order because 3 and 6 are going to be ordered differently. So we could set that up. Let's just do that to start with. So I'm going to order them differently. Nth child 3, and notice they are in the same order, the same source order. 3 comes before 6, so we can give them both the same order number. We'll have 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. I want 3 and 6 to be at the end, so I can give them both an order of 1. Because it's not 6 and 3, then I'd have to give them specific order numbers. But because it's 3 to 6, which matches the source order, I can give them the same order number, the same weight value. Right? Oops. So number 3 and number 6 are going to have an order of 1. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 6. 1, 2. 1, 2, 4, 5. 1, 2, 4, 5, 3, 6. 1, 2, 4, 5, 3, 6. Great. Does everybody understand why 3 and why I could use the same order number for both of these? Or does anybody not understand? I guess is a better question. I could say I want number 3 to have 1 and number 6 to have 2, and they do that, but they have the same. They're in the same order. 3 comes before 6 in the code, right? In the source order. So I can just give them the same number. They'll shuffle to the end of the chain, 1, 2, 4, 5, and then 3, 6, because they're in the same order. 1 will do it. Great. Okay, so we're in the same order now. Now I need to, there's a couple of ways I can approach this, right? I'm going to start with number 1 and number 6. Let's do number 1 and number 6 and see if we can get these working here. Let's see, stack. I'll just do this. Stack 9 number 1 and stack number 6, right? These are both going to be 100% in width. I could use 100% of width, but we're using flex. So I want to use flex basis, 100%. Great. So far, so good. And now we've got a couple of different, we got a couple of problems here, right? Our last two blocks, number 2 and number 3. Number 2 and number 3. Sorry, number 2 and number 3. Yeah, okay. So we want to affect these guys together. Right? Now, what do we want to do here? We want to make them bigger, right? They want to use up available space. What's the property we want to use to make 2 and 3 use up this available space? Flex grow, yeah, flex grow sounds good, right? We want to use flex grow will let individual items take up remaining space. Now, how many times are we using flex grow in this stack? Remember, there's a comma here, right? How many times does it appear? It appears 2 times, right? 2 and 3. So it's going to be out of 2. We want to split that remaining space into 2. So 1 out of 2 for the first item, which is this child, and 1 out of 2 for that child, right? It's going to appear twice. For example, I could do it something like this. It might make it look a little bit more dynamic. This might help, right? In this container, flex grow appears twice. We want flex grow number 2 and number 3. So it means it's going to be, right? We're going to be flex grow is now out of 2 or in halves, right? /2. Does that make sense, guys? You see how I accomplished that? Okay. So now it's out of 2. Now that we know that, I'm just going to go back to the comma. The idea of using it's just cleaner, right? Comma means and. They're both sharing it. So now that we know it's out of 2, it makes sense to give them each 1 out of 2. And when I do that, they're going to share that equal space. A half of it's going to go to the first one, and the other half, like 1 out of 2 there, and then another half to number 3, which is 1 out of 2 or 1/2. Do you guys see? Did that make sense when we break down kind of it's just fractions, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And this is kind of a more complicated kind of scenario, but even that's not that bad, right? All I did was I looked and said, okay, what do we have to do here to get these all to work in the way we need it to work? Okay. That's it for this little extra. If you want to save this, guys, just go ahead and fork it, and you should already have this. But hopefully it was helpful before you guys go on. You take off for your break here. Was that helpful to go through it again and have a conversation and just refresh on it? Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like all the little names to remember and the rules and stuff. So it's important. I'm really happy it was helpful. Okay, I don't need to save this, so I'm going to close that. Okay, again, you're not submitting that. Please don't submit that. I know I've been clear about it. So what we're going to do is
very helpful. Sort of cut you off. Very helpful again, Rob. Seriously, much appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad that you guys find it useful. I mean, that's really what we have to do here, right? Just reinforcing it because layout is so important, and we don't want to use things like float left and float right. It's unwieldy, right? And that's really more for like images and things like that. We don't want to use things like display inline block because that's kind of, again, it's old school unwieldy. When we're creating a layout, we have to be really confident using the kinds of tools that are available. And right now, Flex is a really powerful one, and even more powerful is Grid. So we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we are going to do Flexbox Froggies, and we're going to do it together. Okay, so Flexbox Froggy is here. It's available as a link, and I'm going to talk you through what we're going to do because we're going to submit it on as a GitHub link. We're going to practice making a page out of it. We're going to do it together, and then you're going to submit your answers. All right, but first, let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back again just to make sure we have enough time. and we'll come back and tackle that. Okay, so just bear with me, guys. Let me set up a 10-minute timer. 10-minute timer. Okay. All right. Thanks. We'll see you guys in about 10 minutes. All right, guys, we are back. Ready to go. Okay. So just one more time to reiterate, guys, that Flex Blocks assignment you've already submitted, that was for review only. Please do not submit that. We are going to be instead submitting a Flexbox Froggies. Now, again, it's called in-class exercise, but keep in mind that these are participation exercises. That's why they're due at 11:59. So just, I'm just in the interest of full disclosure. But we are going to be doing that today. We have about an hour left to cover this and anything else that might pop up. So we're going to do that. And then also we're going to submit. So there's a couple of little things like in the last semester, what I asked people to do was something a little different. I want to keep everything as consistent as possible for this semester. So let's go take a look and see what it wants us to do. We're going to complete the Flexbox Froggy game because games are fun. And then what we're going to do is create a file on our GitHub pages with the code containing each of the solutions. Okay, so it'll be a visible page we're going to create. We're going to do that together, and we're going to submit a link to a working GitHub page. That's username.github.io, not github.com/username. And we're going to submit the solutions as an HTML or a text file. HTML is probably the easiest solution. I'm going to walk through it with you. So let's get that set up right now, and then we'll jump into the game. Okay, so I'm just going to move this off screen. That's really weird. And okay, so I'm going to take a look. So I want to open up first and foremost. I'm going to open up my editor. Oh boy. I don't want to save that. There we go. And I can see I've already got something open there. I'm just going to close it so we're all on the same page. I have a nice, clean, empty folder. You guys might already have a folder open there. What I want to do is I want to open a folder. I can drag it if I want to, but I want to open a folder that has my username.github.io that's on my computer, right? So I'm going to open a folder, or I can just drag that folder right in and just over top of it. That's if you're on Mac, you can put it on top of the icon. And I'm going to go to my desktop where I have all kinds of stuff and such. And I remember I put everything in 6130. That's where I put everything. If I look inside of that, there it is. Username.github.io. That's the file that's synced that I have on my computer that is synchronized or connected to my GitHub account. So I'm going to select that folder, and it's going to open up here inside my GitHub, right? And I see inside I've got GitHub pages or whatever you would call it. It should look something like that. Hopefully you guys are following along. Let me know if you need me to slow down or something. So it should be just whatever the file is that's connected, right? So if I go to this address on my computer, then that's going to be, where we're on my browser, that's going to be a website in there, or we're going to be able to access it. So what I want to do is I want to create a new folder in here with a HTML file inside of it. So I'm going to go up here to hover over top of where that folder is, and I'm going to click on the new folder, right? Nope. Hang on here. Sorry. I don't want to do that. I want it to be on top of this one. There we go. A new file. That's not going to work either. Why is that not working? Hang on. Am I doing something? No, that's going to put a folder inside of that. I don't want that at all. Okay. All right. Well, then I don't know why it's not working for me. I'm having things are crazy. Okay, that's fine. I'm just going to go open the folder and I'll do it manually. Let me explain what's going on here. When I click on this folder, watch what happens. We can see I'm indenting. Here's the folder I'm in, kingsbr.github.io, right? And then it indents one level, which means it's a child. Inside of that is GitHub pages. And then it indents one level, and we can see inside of that is index.html. When I click on the new folder, watch where it wants to put it. Inside of it, GitHub pages. That's not where I want to put it. That's why these indentations are important. I just saved myself some trouble. For some reason, it wants to create a new folder inside of there. I don't know why that is, and I don't like it. So I'm just going to save myself the trouble. I'm going to go manually create that folder so that I know I'm in good shape. I think the problem is because I opened this folder directly. I should have opened the parent folder. That's what would have happened. But anyway, I'm going to go create that folder manually. I'm going to do that by going over here. I'm going to go to my desktop. And whoops, no, that's not it either. I'm going to go, there we go, desktop. And on my desktop, I got 12 million things. There it is. There's my file. my folder, and I can see everything here. Now I can create my folder inside of here, and I'm going to call it Flexbox-Froggy or Froggies, I guess. I'll call it Flexbox Froggies. And there's going to be no spaces, no capitals. And look, now it appeared in the right spot, right? Flexbox Froggies, it appeared in the right spot. Okay. So, yeah, that's how I had to do it. Make sure it's beside it. It should not be inside of GitHub Pages. If it is, just move it out or delete it and start again. Okay. My problem, guys, is that I opened this directly. I should have opened the parent and then I could open files. It's just the way that Visual Studio Code works. It's a glitch, but all right. So you should have two files inside, or however you have it structured. You should have your username.github.io. And when you open it, you should see a folder called Flexbox Froggies. That's what we're going to work inside of today. I'm going to go into Flexbox Froggies and create a new file. There we go. Now I can see the indenting has worked. I'm going to call it index.html because the first file in any folder on the web is called index.html. I should see my source code light up with blue over here saying, hey, there's a new file. For sure, it's an untracked file and it's ready to go. Okay, because
Sorry, Rob.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rob. Can you just go to when you click on Flexbox Froggies to get to the new file to get index is right there. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you can just right click inside new file or select it and then say file, new file. There's a bunch of different ways. I find the easiest way is to make sure you're inside of just hover over it and then hit the new file button. Right.
Perfect.
And you'll see it tells you Flexbox Froggies. And then inside of that is index.html. So our structure is where we want it. If we hover over it, we can see in the tab, our structure is correct. When I go to this is going to sync up directly. So when I go to username.github.io/flexbox-froggies, then it should, this is the way it's going to sync up. That'll be the address we want.
Cheers. Thank you.
No problem. Do you guys remember how to create an HTML file very simply without doing any writing? All your basic HTML stuff using Emmet? Yeah, there you go. Like just an exclamation mark, tab. Ta-da! And I'm fine with everything.
Very satisfying. Very satisfying.
It's so nice, right? The only thing here, guys, I'm happy with everything the way it is anytime you submit a document, please always have a title and always fill the title out, because I hate seeing document or even worse yet, nothing. That's very frustrating for me because you should always have the title. There's always a page title, right? So I'm going to put a title in here. I'm just going to call it Flexbox Froggy or Flexbox Froggies, I guess, because that's what Flexbox Froggies. And I'm ready to save. Okay, I can see over here it's ready to push. I'm not going to bother pushing yet. That's fine. Okay. All right. Everybody with me so far? Okay. Anybody need a second? If it's not working, you can go back. It's no problem at all. Just do yourself a favor. Keep track of all of the things, even inside of just a text file like this. Just keep track of everything so that you can we can have it going. Now, what I want you to do is we're going to use some simple HTML here. Do you guys remember how to create an ordered list? That is a list that self-numbers. What's the HTML to create a list with numbers? Yeah, OL, ordered list. Yeah, or OL. And so each one is going to be a list item. Each one of the answers is going to be a list item inside of the OL. This is what it's going to look like. And we're going to have about 24 of these actually. Okay. So I'll walk you through. So we're at this stage, we're ready to start submitting. When you submit, it'll just be a URL and it'll be off to the races, right? There's no requirement to put styles in here, right? I'm not looking for any styles. This is purely just a tech thing. If you want to put some in practice, hey, that's great. Good for you. It's, shows who's here to lean and who's here to clean, but I'm not going to be marking out or anything like that. It'd purely be for practice for you. All you have to do is put some straight in HTML in here. Let's go take a look at the assignment. Put this aside for now. Let's go over here. I'm just going to adjust the sizing because we don't need a monster. There we go. Now there's Flexbox Froggy. I can also access it from here. All right. And it looks like this. Some of you may have already done this because it's a fun exercise. There's also one called CSS Diner. Next week, we'll probably be looking at, there's one for CSS Grid, which is called Grid Garden. These are just gamified ways of playing with CSS. It's a lot of fun. Well, I mean, as fun as dry code can be. In this example, the lily pad is the Flexbox container. Okay, and you can see there's the pond, the blue area, and it's got a display of flex. And then what we want to do is we want to get the frog, which we can see is vibing here, to land on the lily pad. And sometimes they're color coordinated and things like that. Okay, so we want that to happen. So that's kind of an important thing we want to do. And then we'll see here, there'll be, in this case, there's one available space. So we're looking for one property. So let's see what happens. It says, we're going to be using justify content. Here's the available options we have. And it tells us this is what we want to do. It'll make it move to the right. Okay, so display flex means it's on the main axis. In this case, justify dash content flex end is going to move it to the end of that row. Sure enough, it does. This turns red and moves, and we're ready to go to the next one. But before we go, I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to save it here. Save, just like that. Just what we put in, not everything, just what we put into the little box. We wrote justify content flex end, so that's what I'm going to put in my list item. And then I go to the next one, set up a new list, and I'm ready to move to the next assignment. You guys, I guess everyone can imagine what I'm doing here. I just want to take the answers and paste them into a file and make a little HTML out of it. Let's continue. Hit next, and we'll go to number 2. Okay, in this case, it's looking for one solution. Now, it wants us to use justify content to make them land on the lily pads, right? The lily pads are just like visual placeholders, but what are we going to use here to get the lily pads on the proper, or to get the frogs in the proper lily pads? What do you guys think? Here's the available options are listed above the text box, right? What makes sense? Center. Yeah, probably, right? It's not rocket science. We just want to center them. There we go. It allows us to do that. Once I put that in, it worked. I'm going to copy this, put it in my HTML file, and we're going to move forward. Save as we go. Always make sure it's save. All right. Now, guys, as we go forward, you might miss one. I'm going too fast, whatever. You can always go back and review the content, okay? And then just do it. They're not hard to do until we get to like the last one, or I think the last one is the only one that's even difficult, okay? So just if you miss one, just keep moving forward and go back and hit that next one later. So here we are, number 3. It wants us to use justify content again. Let's just see. It's going to be one of these spacing ones. I'm sure of it. What do you guys think? Let's take a look. We've got space between. That's not right. We've got space around. That looks good. And the other one is space evenly. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, it's not right either. Definitely space around. Yep, that's it. It even tells us it's okay. I'm going to highlight this, copy it, put it in a new list item, and move on. You guys getting the gist of what I'm doing here? Hopefully. Okay, let's keep going. Again, justify content. In this case, we can see it wants to go edge to edge, which is going to be what? What do you guys think? It's going edge to edge. So space. Between, yeah. Space between. It worked. Super. Thank you, Marina. Appreciate that. Before I go on, guys, it's pretty quiet in here. Can I get a show of hands to see who's all here? Anybody who's doesn't put their hand up, I'll just remove them. No problem. Just to see who's actually here. So you do the actual raise hand emote if you don't mind. It just seemed like it got real quiet all of a sudden. That makes me nervous. Because then I get all kinds of questions later. I'm like, why weren't you just in class?
I'm still here. Sean's still here.
I see you there. Okay, can I get a show of hands?
I'm still here.
All right, can you do the raise hand emote, or are you on mobile? Or I see Sean still here.
I actually don't know how to raise hand. I can't find raise hand. Anyway,
oh, it should be in the reactions at the bottom.
Yeah, reactions. I only have
still here.
I have clap, thumb, heart. I don't have raise hand.
Okay, but either way, that shows like I'm what, there's like 10 people who aren't raising their hands, so I can only assume you guys aren't here. Can I get everyone to do at least a thumbs up if you're here?
People, please, come on. Come on.
Well, it just gives me an idea of like, I mean, take a look at those names. People don't have their hands up. Those are the ones who are going to ask you guys for help later. Tell them to show up to class, perhaps. It's frustrating. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you very much. So if you are here and you raise your hand, thank you guys. I appreciate that. I love that you guys are here and reacting with me. That's really great. Thank you. This whole thing is so frustrating. I can't wait to get back butts and seats, right? Let's continue on, move forward with this. So we are on the, moving on to the fifth one. Okay. Thanks, guys. You can lower your hands. All right. So we've got our display of flex over here. It's asking for a new one now. It wants us to go on the cross axis, right? So display of flex is set up. We can see in the row, but it wants us to be on the cross axis, which is going to be the vertical. So we want to use align items. And of course, all the options are the same. Thank you, Sebastian. You got it. Right. We're going to be using the same flex start and flex end, except we're doing it on the cross axis. So we use flex end. And lo and behold, they go to the end, right? So it's the same idea. We're just doing it on the cross axis inside the flex container. Copy that, paste it in, move over to list item, or create a new list item and save it. Okay, moving on to number 6. Now, this has option for 2 spaces, okay? 3 lines 3 and 4. So, and there's going to be places later where you can just use one for in sake of ease. Please use both, though. I want to see you guys writing the code that's required. So please use both spaces if there's 2 available. In this case, it's asking specifically for justify content and align items. This is that unicorn of centering, right? But we remember that if we use justify content center and align items center, then we can very easily achieve this always vertical spacing thing. And as we move this around, we can see it's always going to be vertically centered. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Anyway, it'll always be vertically and horizontally centered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy everything this time, justify content, align items, center. I'm going to paste into the new line items. But remember, guys, we're using HTML, so we have to add a line break after the first space or the first line, new line, right? So just a BR. Just make sure to manually add that. Otherwise, it'll look really weird when I get it. And if you want to get good grades, make it easy for me to give you good grades, right? Give me the right thing. So there we go. So I just added a BR, and we'll move on.
Hey, Rob, I find you're going a little too fast.
A little too fast? Absolutely. I can slow down, no problem. Okay, so again, we can go back from here and grab what we need to. Is it the actual Flexbox Froggy part, or the copy and paste is fairly straightforward, right?
It's just jumping in between and getting the answers. I'm slow and a beginner, so I'm just
yeah.
behind.
No, thank you for letting me know. That's a good reminder for me to slow down. Does anybody here have a class immediately after this, or if I need to go right till 12 o'clock? Which I hate to do. I like to leave a 15-minute buffer, but you guys should be good to go right till 12 o'clock. That would give us 45 minutes to get this all done and submitted, right? You have 1 hour. I have a class at 1 o'clock as well, which is 1 hour. So if we go right till 12 o'clock, no one's going to be pushing the line, right? And even if that's the case, guys, it's recorded. You can always go back. So I'll slow down, use up the extra 15 minutes to make sure everyone has the time. All right, so we should have this copied and dropped in. I'm going to move forward now to number 7. And again, we've got 2 options here for spacing. It wants justify and align. So I'm going to start with justify content. Justify content is going to align. Does justify content work on the main axis or the cross axis? Oh, actually, if we hover, it tells us right there on the main axis, right? So we're display of flex, which means it's going to be left to right. So justify content. So this is one of those spacing ones. What do you guys think? So the spacing is going to be space around. That looks about right. Yeah. But we want to move it down to the bottom so that we can see what we're getting at. So let's just see. We move to the bottom. We want to go on the cross axis, which is align items. And align items is going to, we want same type of idea. Right now we're flex start. We go to the very bottom. We could tell to center. We could tell to baseline. But in this case, baseline wouldn't look like much. Flex end works for us. So we space around, does the main axis. flex end does the cross axis and moves to the bottom. It's kind of weird using flex start and end. We just have to remember that we're on that cross axis. I'm going to highlight and copy this. I'm going to drop it into the new list item. And because I have two elements here, I need to add a line break after the first line. We have a nice closing list item here. I can go back, set up my new line item, and get ready to move forward. Is this a better pace for you guys? I've been doing this assignment for quite a while, so sometimes I get in my own head and move quickly. Never fear letting me know to slow down. I have no problem. I want you guys to learn. We're in this together, right, guys? So,
Rob, can you maybe split the screen so we can see the HTML and the Flex Froggies? So
let me see if I can
just move it over. Like, yeah, thanks.
It's here. You know what I can do? I can do like something like this. It's going to be difficult to get it all in, but because I want to make sure everyone can view it. Is that okay like that, guys? Can't get much. I can't
Perfect.
much
Perfect.
better because yeah. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next one. All right. We're looking for a single option here. Now, this one's going to be a strange one. It wants flex direction, right? Now, this one, again, we're changing the flow. We talked about this before. What do you guys think? We're still going to be in a row, right? We're just going to be in the opposite direction, right? So if I say row, that's the default. But like you would think maybe flex end, but then the red would be over here at the other side. Like, it's not what we need. What we need is row reverse. And then it literally takes the first one and moves the order. So now it's moving in the opposite direction, reverses the flow. All right. We saw the change here. So that's easy to work with. I'm going to copy this and I'm going over here and I'm going to paste it right in. I'll get my new list item ready. All right. Maybe I can even make a little more room here. How about that? Anyway, okay. All right. Let's move on to the next one. We are at 8 of 24. All right, we're looking for 1 here. Again, we're talking flex direction in this case as well. Flex direction. And in this case, it just wants us to move from the default of default flex, which is row. Right? What's the opposite of row in the case of flex? Yeah, column. We want to move in column, right? There you go. We just want to make it very simple. We just want to, instead of moving left to right, we're going to move in top to bottom. That's again against the default. It's going to copy it. And I'm going to move it over here into our list item, save it, and we'll get ready to move forward. Okay, number 9 out of 24. It's looking for 2 options, flex direction and justify content. So let's just look at this and be analytical. What do we want to do here? How are we going to accomplish what we need to do? We can see we need to reverse the flow, right? Red, yellow, green. So we need to go red, yellow, green. So how do we reverse that flow? In order to reverse the flow, we need to tell it to go reverse, right? Row reverse. So now we're in the right order, but we're in the wrong spot. If this is now the starting point, how do we want to justify this content? We want to move it back to the start? Huh, didn't work. Why didn't it work, guys? What are we looking for? What's the missing piece here? Yeah, flex end. The missing piece here is this. We want to say flex end because remember, we reversed the flow, which means the start point is no longer here in the top left, means it's reversed. It's over here on the right-hand side. So we instead of this is now flex start, we need to tell it to go this way. So it goes to the flex end. Does that make sense? Let's get that into a new list item. And don't forget to add your line break. Set up my new LI. Hold on, sorry guys, there we go. All right, I just pasted it into a list item, add my line break, and set up a new list item for the next one. All right, moving forward into number 11. We have to speed up just a little bit, guys, okay? So with this case, we want to justify content and align items. Okay, so we want to use both of our kind of alignment tools. All right, so along the main main axis or cross axis, what do you guys think? How do you think we're going to accomplish this? Just in looking at it, right? Okay, let's see. So we use flex direction to change. Yeah, flex direction we can change to a column because we can see clearly we want to be in a column. And this is our starting point. And so we need to move to the end. So we justify the contents and we go flex end and it'll push it all the way down. So we just have to look at it and say, what do we want to do here, right? Are we in a row? First off, are we in a row or a column? Just like the same thing. Do we need multiples? If we do, it's going to be a flex or a wrap. Right, so we just have to be critical about what we're looking at. Okay, but we're learning, so that's okay. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put it into my into here. Don't forget to add my line break because it's 2 lines and set up a new list item. Just copy and paste. Okay. All right, moving forward. So on this next one, we have again we have 2 same type of idea. So we know there's going to be a column, right? So I'm just going to pop that in. It has to be a column for sure. We can see it clearly. Okay. What do you guys think? What about the spacing? Justify content. It's going to be a space one. It's edge to edge. So we're looking for space between, right? Space between. But there's going to be an issue. How do we fix this problem? In the new column, and add the space between. You guys got it. I know you guys know it. I have to test you here, right? Okay, so column reverse. The problem is we just need to change the ordering of the column and start at the end, not the beginning. Perfect. So column reverse and space between. I'm going to copy that into my list item. Don't forget to add my break. And I'll set up a new list item here. Don't forget to be saving as you go. If this is like a dot, it means it's not ready to be saved. Okay, if it's a X, it means it's saved. Okay, moving forward, we're just passing the halfway mark. Okay, this now it wants 3 items: flex direction, justify content, align items. So here we need to be a little more critical, right? We know we got to be at the end. We know we're going to be, I can see we're going to be centered. Okay, and at some point we're going to be reversed. So there's a few things we have to keep in mind here. So what do you guys think? Let's start with flex direction because that's starting right here, right? So with flex direction, are we in a row or a column? Right, we're in a row. But we could probably use this as an opportunity to go reverse. Yeah, awesome. That works. The next one here is justify content. That's going to move us along our main axis. Okay, we can use this to center us, right? And now we want to be on the cross axis, which is align items. What do you think, guys?
Justify end. Sorry, flex end.
Ah, there we go. Flex end. You had the right idea, but sometimes, yeah, it's all these new terms, right? Flex end, absolutely. So again, just take it one step at a time and accomplish what you need. And most importantly, remember that when we change the flow, the direction, that the start and end switch with it. So super important to remember as we go forward. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put it into my list item. Now I have to put break 2 times, right? I need break here. I need a break in the next one. So it should be an HTML tag at the end of every single item, whether it's a slash list or a brick, however you have it formatted. Oh my goodness gracious me. All right, there we go. Just copy and paste. Moving on to number 14. All right, it's looking for one item. Now we're getting into specific. So we've gone through the container, the Flex container properties. Now we're going to start looking at Flex item or specific individual child elements. Okay, in this case, order. So what we want to do here is we've got ourselves in a awkward predicament here, and we need to use it to move the yellow one. So the green is set. We've got a yellow on a red and a red on a yellow. So we want to order the yellow, right? What order are we going to give it? It's the third. We want to move it from the second spot to the third spot here, right? Well, shouldn't it? What if I move it like that? Would or 3? Doesn't that make more sense? I want to be in the third position. Does that make sense? Or for example, if I give it number 1, it still works. What I'm proving to you guys here is that it doesn't have to be the sequential order in sequence 1, 2, 3. It just has to have a higher number than the default, which is 0. Okay, that's what I'm getting at. So I'm going to copy this in and get ready for a new list item, save it, moving forward. Okay, same thing with the red here. Now, again, we want to adjust the ordering. Okay, everything is 0, but we need this red lily pad, red one to go back. So in this case, our order is going to be what? It's moving back 1, 2, 3 spaces.
-1.
Yeah, exactly. -1. It doesn't have to be -3. -3 would work, right? Because it's higher than 0 or less than 0. But -1, we only need to get that specific about it right now. Okay, I'm going to copy that in. -1. Set up a new list item. Save it and get ready to move on. $16 out of 24. We're looking for one item here. Now, again, if we want to move everything, then it's going to be, we're looking for align items, right? But in this case, we're trying to move just one. And so that's align self is what we're looking for. Align self. And it's going to be on the cross axis, right? But we're only trying to align one. And in this case, it's the same command, flex end. So we're just, instead of moving all of them in the container, we're moving one individual item. And we're going to move that down with align self, because that's a singular form, and then flex end. I'm going to copy that into my list item, save it, set up my next one, I guess, first, but I'd like to do that. Save it again. And now I'm ready to move on. The speed okay, guys? I guess it helps having them decide. All right. Moving on to number 17. Okay. Things are getting a little more complicated now. Not crazy, but a little more complicated. We need to use order and align self. Let's start with order because that's the easy one, right? We want the yellow lily pads to go at the end. We've determined already they just have to have a higher number than 0. So I can set that to be 1, right? And so the yellow ones are at the end, but I also need them to be at the bottom of the cross axis. We just did that. So we align self, flex end, and then I'll move down to the end, right? I don't like just giving you guys the answer, but I feel like we like it's fairly straightforward, right? Asking you guys to go and type into the chat. If you want to do that, we can. I would rather do that, but I don't know, in the interest of time and not boring the heck out of everyone. I feel like people aren't really into that today. So I'm not trying to give you the answers. I'm trying to walk you through it. Hopefully it works. It's working for you guys. Okay. Easiest grades you'll get all of the entire program. I'll tell you what. Okay. Moving forward. Now we have one thing we want to do here. Very simply, what is it? Take a look and see what are we trying to accomplish here? Yeah, we want to wrap it, right? We know we want to wrap because we can see there's 2 lines. And plus everything was squished. That's usually giveaway too. Yep, everything's good. Too easy. Flex wrap, wrap. That'll move things to both so that it on both lines instead of all squished together. So I can paste that and set up my new list item. I'll do a save. And we can move on. On to number 19. Okay. Right away, again, we can see just because we did it, we know we need to wrap. Right away, we're going to be wrapping. Okay, but we have a little bit of weird, this one's a little bit weird, right? Okay, we wanted to wrap it. We know that much. But there's something else that's weird about it. What's going on with this? What do we want to do here? We definitely want to adjust the direction, right? Actually, let me just get rid of it that way. Just, you know what, that's fine. We want to change the direction. We wanted to go from, it was set up to be in a row, but we need it to be a column, right? And once we do that, everything's wrapped and everything's in the right order. Doesn't matter what order we do it from. If I said flex direction column, actually, let's just see, there it is. Might have been easier to say flex direction column. Wow, let me spell it rightly. Oh my goodness, guys. Okay, flex direction column. And then we can say, oh, I see the issue is now that we need to wrap. So however you need to accomplish it, that's fine. As long as you're again, thinking critically about what needs to be accomplished here. The order doesn't really matter. Okay, save that in, add a BR for a line break, and add my list. Okay, and on to number 20. Okay, what do we have here? So number 20, in this one's a little bit different. So we haven't covered this yet. There is a property we didn't cover, and it's called flex flow. Okay, flex flow is what we call a shorthand property. It's like saying margin. Margin covers, when I say margin 10 pixels, it puts 10 pixels on the top, right, bottom, and left. I could be specific and say margin left or margin bottom, and that's fine too. But margin is just shorthand for all 4. And flex flow is the same. Flex flow lets us use shorthand to put 2 properties in the same value, right? So in this case, the properties we can use with flex flow are going to be the direction and the wrap, right? So we can put the direction, whether it's row or column, and the wrap or don't wrap. And the reason there's a nice shorthand for this one in particular is because this is the easiest way to set up a basic structure for building a web, like a layout for a web page. Okay, which is kind of the standard here. So I'm going to use flex flow. And in this case, we want to say what direction do we want to go? And then are we wrapping? So we're going to start with, we know that when we're using, in this case, the flex flow, we want to be probably some sort of a column. So let's just take a look and see, right? And we want it to wrap. And there we are. Make sense, guys? It's just a shorthand value. They have to be in that order. Okay, so I'm going to take that. I'm going to copy it in. Thank you, shorthand. Get ready for my next one. I can move on. Okay. So we're on to number 21 right now. So in this case here, we want to, what we have basically is everything's flexed and it's all wrapped. So it's starting at this point and it's got space. It's just stretching between on the cross axis, right? So we need to use align items on the cross axis to get it put in the right spot. What would be the right spot, guy? Sorry, align content, not items. And put it, what would be the right spot? What do you guys think? Right, we could do that, but really it should say flex start. I didn't know start worked. That's weird that worked. Anyway, flex start is the correct terminology for it. So align content flex start. That's simply because we have a display of flex, which puts everything in a row, and then we have wrap, which will make it, it'll make it wrap to a new line. And then automatically is going to put the space between it. So what we want to do is tell it to align to the top instead of stretching like would be the default by using that. All right. And I'm going to move forward. I just got a message from someone. I'll talk to you. Stick around the end of class. We'll have a conversation about that. Okay. So no problem. Okay, just bear with. Okay. I'm going to copy this in and move on to the next one. Create my new list item, save, and I'll move on to the next one. Okay. So we're on to number 22. Okay. This is the same basic idea. Okay, we again, the frogs are all in the same row. We have a display of flex. That means they're all going to be in a row left to right. They're wrapped, so they're in a nice neat order. So we need to use align content to get the move this on the cross axis, right? The cross. If we're in a row, display flex means left to right, which is on the x axis. And we want to align them on the cross axis by putting them down at the bottom. So we would use align content, flex end, right? We saw flex start in the beginning. Now we see flex end. All right. We're on to number 23. Let's save that. Okay. This is a little more complicated, right? Now, this is where we start having to think about what direction we're heading when we change, when we shift the flow, what direction, what is now start and what is now end. So let's start with our, it's 3, right? So we can see 1, 2, 3 this way, 3 that way. So we're probably going to have to move into a column, right? So let's try that first. Let's try our flex direction of moving into a column. Okay, kind of there, right? Let's try column reverse and see if that looks any better. Yeah, we're in the right order with column reverse. Okay, so because we're column reverse, we've changed the order, right? But it may not make too much difference in this case. So when we do our align content, right, which again, this is what it's asking for, and it's asking us to align on the cross axis. What are we going to do here? We've done the reverse order, but it doesn't matter. There's no spacing. So it's a fairly straightforward one. We just want to center it. There's no spacing that we're worrying about. Just center it. I'm going to copy that in. And I'm going to use my BR for a new line. Now this next one, guys, is all you. Please do not post the answer in the chat. Just hang on to it. When you get the answer, put your hand up. Okay? Don't say it or post it. Just hang tight. This one's a little bit tricky. The key here, guys, is remembering the order, the where you've adjusted to, and the direction you're now heading. I got a couple of people already on it. If you need to know more, you can hover over things and get more information about what's there, right? We got flex wrap, we've got no wrap, wrap reverse, we've got order, we've got flex start, flex end, center, baseline. There's all kinds of things that we could possibly do. When you get it, just put your hand up. I'll just give it a couple of minutes. I want everyone to kind of get a head start here. Then we'll run through it. Anyone else? You got it? If you figure it out, put your hand up. right away, I can look at this and I can see a couple things. I can see that we need to, we definitely are going to need to wrap, and we're definitely going to need columns. These are things that I know for sure. So let's just start with one of them to start with. I'm going to start with the wrap because I can see it's going to be columns in two lines, right? So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to start with a flex, or I'll start with a column, right? How about that? So flex direction. Let's just try column. I'm going to start with that. I can see that kind of works, but unfortunately the red has to be on the other side. That means we're going to be looking at column reverse. That looks to be a little better, right? So now we're in the wrong space and we're not wrapped, but we're in the right direction already. But speaking of direction, the flow has changed. So we have to keep that in mind when we're working on our cross axis now. All right. So let's try wrapping it now, right? Flex wrap, wrap. Okay. That's not working either. It's pretty close. Let's look at what we have up here. No wrap, which is the default. Wrap and wrap reverse. Wrap reverse, eh? So wrap reverse, let's just try that and see what happens. Wrap reverse. Oh, look at that. So it wrapped it, but it wrapped it from the different direction. That's critical here. Okay, we've got two more. We're getting places, right? Now we want to look at our justifications and our alignments. So let's start with our main axis. Okay, justify content. So the main axis now, which way is the main axis? Can anyone tell me? It's an X or a Y. What's the main axis?
Should be Y, right?
Yeah, we're on Y because we determined it here. Flex direction, column reverse. It's a column, so the main axis is going to be Y. That means because we shifted from the default X to a Y, which is top to bottom, because we've done that, the if we were to use if we wanted to go to the center, right, justify content and get those in the center, that we have to remember that we're in that hang on here, justify content center, right? We have to remember that because we're in this order, that to get these moved up now, we're not talking about align content. We're talking about justify content. We want to move along the main axis. That's why centering works in this order, in this case, because we're moving along the main axis, which we determined is Y. So we're able to center it. And if that means the cross axis is X, and if we want to move these to the end of the cross axis, what are we going to use here? We want to move it to the end. We say flex end. That didn't work, right? Can we think of anything else that would work in here? Whoops. Oh, sorry about that. That's the line. Oh. Okay, sorry about that. Can we think of anything else in here that would work for align content? Yeah. Oh yeah, we got some there. Yeah, for sure. We can use it to put space between it, because we can see it's up edge to edge with some space in the middle, right? So space between. There we go. We'll actually create that space. And that's the solution. I wanted to give you guys a chance to do it, but I also feel it was important to walk through it with you, right? So hopefully everyone was able to see how that kind of worked and why that worked. This is a weird scenario too, because we're trying to get them on the leap pads. We don't see that very often, but it's a good exercise in seeing how things work together. Okay, I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it in here for number 24. Make sure I add line breaks on all of the items that need it. I think we're probably going to do another one of these next week for our in-class. And just for anyone who's interested, if you look up CSS Diner, you might have done this. This is another similar type of thing where it teaches you really cool, complex selectors. Highly recommended. It's a lot of fun. It's the same type of idea. CSS Diner. Anyway, okay, so we've got this done now. This is all done. We got up to 24. Everything should be green when I click on it. Okay, I'm going to move that just out of the way for a second. And what we have here, we have about 10 minutes left before we're done. So we'll just get this thing submitted, right? For those of us who are doing it. Now, so it's all just an HTML file. I want this displayable. I can see I need to push it up to my GitHub. So I'm going to save it, make sure it's saved, double check the format, OL/OL, closing list items, we're good. Looks good to me. Okay, I'll open my scenario. Now I want to go over here to my source control panel, right? So I click on where the one is a source control panel. What's the first thing that we want to do when we're getting ready to to push this up to GitHub? What's the first thing we want to do? Stage the changes, absolutely. And we can save and stage, even better. Carol, good job. So just make sure we're saved, right? In my case, I am. I'm going to do it again. Save it, okay, or Command Control S, whichever one. And then I can push this little plus, and it'll get it into the staging part. I can see there's an untracked. This is brand new, so there's a U. So I push that up. Now it's in the stage, ready to go. In order for me to commit it, which means this chunk is done, I'm going to go into my message, and I'm going to say, creates Flexbox Froggies. Okay, we always do it a schnurble or a. That's not useful, right? Make sure your messages are useful so that when you're looking back, you can find out exactly what that commit did. It's imperative. That's the standard going forward. Okay, and sometimes in this industry, the people will ask you to submit your GitHub, and they're going to look, and if they see, if they see bad commit messages, then it's a warning flag. Okay, so I'm going to hit the enter or the question mark. I can see everything's gone, but down at the bottom can see I have 1 ready to push and 0 ready to pull. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to synchronize with the GitHub, and it's done. Okay, I'll move this back out of the way, grab my browser, and let's go check it out. GitHub.com/ there's my repo. Inside of here, I can see I was working in kingsbr.github.io. So that's the repo I want to get to right there. Perfect. Creates Flexbox Froggies 42 seconds ago, and it has been updated. That's awesome. So I'm going to take a look. I see over here I've got a check mark, right? And that check mark means that I should be good to view it, right? All checks have passed. So it should be, if it's an orange dot, it means that it's still double checking. I can click it to make sure, yeah, I can see it's all there. Now, I don't want this link. In fact, I never want this link. I don't want to see your repository. I want to see a working website. I can get to this, no problem. I can always just reverse engineer. So just a pro tip for you guys, do not ever, please. I will deduct marks for this, okay? I don't care if it's the final assignment. If you submit the wrong link, you're going to get, going forward, you're getting a 0. I'm being very clear and transparent about it right now. Don't copy this link and submit it. That is not the correct link. It'll create clickable areas, right? That are going to take me back. If I click it, look, it takes me to another repo page. If I click it, it takes me to a repo page. What I want to do is I want to go to the live website, and I can see it here. It'll be username.github.io/FlexboxFroggies in my case. kingsbr.github.io/Flexbox-Froggies, if I spell it right. And there it is. This is the page I want. So this is where I'm going to grab the URL from. Select it, copy it. I'm going to submit this URL. Back here, go to Flexbox Froggies, submit that URL. Okay. Please do not submit this URL. If it says github.com, it's the wrong URL. It has to be start with username.github.io. I also, guys, be careful it doesn't start with this. Right? All I did in this case is I went over, I used my browser and I right-clicked and I opened with live server, but look at the difference. It starts with 127.0.1, whatever. Okay. That's a lot. That's a local server. So do not submit that either. Oh, I'm going to tape his face shut. I'm not really going. He's a good dog. But we have 120 point, that's not the right one. We want to make sure it always starts with your username.github.io. If it starts with anything else, it is the wrong link. Sorry to beat a dead horse, guys. I fought people tooth and nail last semester to submit the right link, and it was just lost. I don't know why. That's the only link. Okay, it has to start with your username.github.io and then whatever, and it should be a working web page. If you submit me a repo, you're going to lose marks for now, 50%. But in coming weeks, it'll just drop to 0. Because I think I'm being pretty clear. Okay. Is there any questions about that? Okay, we're down to a couple minutes left. So get that submitted. So right click inside the URL only. There's actually a GIF in the announcements that just show this exact same thing. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go over to my assignment and go in. I don't have the same. If I click on this, it's going to take me to a different, I can't submit. So submit that link, get it. Once it's submitted, click it again, grab it, copy, paste, and it should take you there. If it takes you here, resubmit, get the right link and resubmit it. Always double check what you submit. It's on you guys, right? Make sure you submitted the right thing. It'll save you from submitting the wrong assignment or whatever. All right. Any questions about what we covered today? Oh, it's super quiet. Okay. So
no, that's good. Thank you, Rob.
Oh, great. Okay. So that's what we have basically for today. So make sure that link's submitted. You've got until midnight tonight to do it. I am going to post the video, but it takes a little bit of time for Zoom to process it and make it ready. When it does, I will post it down here in the, I'll show you here. Under week 3, I have a recording section. Okay. That's stuff from here. I keep that here for myself if I ever need to refer back, but you're going to see right now it should be empty, and you'll see it'll say week 3 recording with a passcode, and you can click it and get into it. That's where you'll be able to access it, and that'll be posted hopefully in the next little bit. It might take up to an hour.
Rob, can I just see the last, yeah, just for 1 second. Can I just see? I'm not very good. Content and space between.
Here, let me just do this. Might be a little easier to see.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yep. So is there any other questions anybody has beforehand? Okay. All right, guys, that's what I got for you today. Thank you so much for coming and being here and engaging and not ghosting on me. Take note of those who didn't raise their hand, right? I mean, that's there's people who are here to clean, there's people who are here to lean. So I'm glad you guys are cleaners. Thank you very much. It will reflect in your grades. Have a great day, guys. I'll try and get everything. No problem. I'll try and get everything graded and submitted within the next 24 to 48 hours for you, so you can use it for review. And that's that. Take care, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Rob.
you very much, Rob. Take care.
Yep.
Cheers.
See you next
Have a good week.
Yeah, see you guys.
Thank you.
See you. Thank you. If you guys have questions, just stick around. I'll answer your questions at the end. Thank you, guys. Glad you find it useful. It's hard to make dry code fun, so I do my best. All right, close that up.
No,
Okay.
I appreciate the explanations, Rob. You're very concise. I appreciate your style of teaching.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just like to, especially online, when we're teaching online, it's so important to attack everything from multiple angles, because there's different learning styles, and I want to, try and hit lots of different examples and just reinforce, and I think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely right. It must be as a prof, it's got to be so difficult to be teaching online, I feel.
It's
It's a challenge, I guess.
It's a challenge because we rely on when I'm in class face to face, I rely on seeing everybody, everybody's body language, right? So if it's something that people don't understand,
Absolutely.
I can't get those faces like, oh, I don't get it. And then I know just instinctively to go over again, but I don't get that here. So feedback is so important, to have people raising hands and actually being here and doing those things. Otherwise, I can't read minds. I don't know if there's something that's not working.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
you're doing a good job. So thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
So if you guys are done, I'll ask you to leave the room. I got a couple of people who probably need some help.
Thanks again. Take care.
See you guys. Anybody who has any questions, you can raise your hand. I can help you out one by one. I know there's at least 2 of you in here. Rand, just regarding your question, can you just email me your student number? Anytime you guys want to contact the professor or anybody in the class, you should be. I sent an announcement in Brightspace about this. Just add a signature to your email client with your name, your student number, and your section number. The section number is almost the most important thing. I know you're in my class, I just don't know which section. So that's really the most important thing. So if you can do that, that'd be great. So just email me your request. And yep. And I'm gonna hit a breakout room. So I have someone else asking for a breakout room. If there's nothing else, I'm going to go to the breakout room and then I'm going to close the meeting off. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop recording then.